Food is such an important part of Mexican culture. It's just such a binding element of who we are. I grew up in a family where food was the glue of everything. Just sharing a table brings people together in a way that few things do. I never set out to become a chef. I opened Contramar. And it sounds ridiculous, and that's what it is. I opened a restaurant, and it was an experiment that was so successful that I turned it into my career. Camachito, buenos días. Buenos días, muchachos, ¿cómo están? Qué rico. ¿Va a haber chicharrón en salsa verde? Sí. ¿Pediste chicharrón? Qué bueno. Mi favorito. When we opened Contramar 22 years ago, it really was a different world. Contramar was funnily enough, a very farm-to-table restaurant in Mexico City, in a context where that was not the popular way to go. I think that the common thread in my food has to do with caring about each part of what I do. It's the care in what ingredient you choose, it's the care in how you treat it, it's the care in how you present it. And I believe that this spirit that has always been part of my household somehow was translated to the restaurant because I wanted to welcome people as I would to my house. And I believe that that's what makes the restaurant special. So this is what I try to carry through the restaurants. Contramar, Entremar, Cala, Onda, and everything that I am a part of because it's what really matters to me. My mother's Italian, my father's Mexican, and they met in the United States. And so I grew up in sort of these three countries. But now we're gonna talk about Mexican food, so I'm gonna focus on my Mexican part. In my masterclass, I wanna give you a taste of a few things that are very loved from my restaurants. And I also wanna teach you a few recipes for cooking what I cook at home and what we eat in Mexico City. I'm gonna teach you how to make a few delicious salsas. I'm gonna teach you how to make pescado a la talla. It's our most popular dish at Contramar for sure. It was the first dish on the menu, tuna tostadas, a dish that is on so many menus in Mexico and abroad. Contramar was the first restaurant to serve the tuna tostada, I'm very proud to say. We're also gonna make a quesadilla and we're gonna fry it. I'm gonna teach you how to make aguachile, tamales. We're gonna make tacos al pastor. And I'm gonna teach you how to make tortillas. And I'm gonna teach you about corn. I'm gonna teach you how central to the Mexican diet corn is. It's really difficult to think of a Mexican meal without thinking about corn. It's sort of like thinking about a French meal without bread. It's been the main ingredient in every meal of every person that has a little bit of Mexican blood. I'm gonna share stories about my experience as a cook and things that have to do with Mexican culture, the way we use ingredients that pave the way for a very, very complex cuisine that has just become richer and richer through the years. I want to give you basic guidelines from which to start, points of reference that you have to know in order to then be able to improvise. I'm a big supporter of cooking with what you have around you. If you are into sustainability and making food out of the best possible ingredients, you're in for a good surprise. Yo soy Gabriela Cámara y esta es mi masterclass. In Mexico, corn has this sacred aspect. It's the sustain of the population of this part of the world. Frankly, the most important ingredient in food. And in America, it's just a large crop. And it's mostly one variety. You know, when you have corn on the cob, it's this yellow, sweet, delicious, and you have organic varieties, which are more delicious than others. But you don't have this process of drying the corn and then grinding it, making a dough from which you make tortillas or tamales or atole or all these other things that come from the process of cooking dry corn. Drying the corn is the only way to actually keep the corn. So we have a tradition of saving the best seeds, planting them before the rainy season, you know, preparing the land, planting them, and then harvesting them in the fall, in the early fall, so that you have, again, your crop for the next year. We have, I think, cataloged around 60 varieties of heirloom corn, and they keep on discovering new species and new families. So here we have a few varieties of Mexican heirloom corns. And as you can see, we have different colors, and it's very varied, very varied. Different parts of the country produce different types of corn. For example, this is a type of Oaxacan white corn. This is a type of blue corn. This is a type of red corn. We do see this really beautiful diversity of colors, diversity of forms. You know how it's a round end, and these are a pointy end. You have maíz cónico, which finishes in like a little cone shape. And then you have the bolita, which ends up being round. And these are sort of colloquial names. But then you have all your scientific names. But I do want you to notice how different all the colors are. Like these corns came from mixing other corns, you know, the white, the red. You have this sort of tie-dyed corn, which isn't tie-dyed, it's just like mixed. This is a more transparent, rounder type of corn, which is not as common because, of course, what farmers usually want is a really long and thick corn so that they can get more yield from it. And, you know, it's easy to peel, and what you do is like you peel it and you get all the grains. This is what you do when you want to get all your seeds. And you have starchier corns that will make for a more fluffy masa, if you will. And it's really fascinating when you go to communities and people use 3 or 4 different varieties of corn in maybe even one special meal. Like they use one for the atole, which is a drink, then they use another one for the tortillas, and then they use another one for a pozole, and then they use another one for making a different, you know, you could have a different preparation. You can have a tlacoyo, you can have a tetela, you can have, these are all shapes of things that you make tortillas with fillings in little packages to eat. I will show you some of these things also. Mostly, it's become very hard to have heirloom corn be cultivated by the communities that have made it possible to now even have it. So there are big efforts in Mexico now to salvage these heirloom corns and to promote the growth of them. But in Mexico, we're moving swiftly into this fast food consumption, and preserving heirloom corns is the antidote for that. So I'm a big promoter of it. So now I'm going to show you how to nixtamalize corn. We're going to use a variety of white corn from Oaxaca. It's called Blanco Comiteco, and it's from a small town called Santa Catarina, Jiquila. And I'm going to show you how to nixtamalize it so we can eat it. Nixtamalizing is a process by which the proteins become readily accessible for humans. This is limestone, which is usually found in nature. It's a stone that is very soft, so people scrape it. And it is calcium hydroxide. And you can find it nowadays easily because it's what's used for pickling. So I have my powder here, and now I'm gonna have my water boiling, and I've already measured this. For a little under a kilo of corn, you use about 10 grams of the limestone, and I'm gonna put it in the boiling water, and I'm gonna mix it in, and I'm gonna make sure you have a milky water where the lime is easily distributed. And I'm gonna put in the corn and basically let it boil And what I want is for the skin of the corn to be dissolved by this powder, that breaks into it and hence allows the protein to come out so that we can absorb it when we eat it. And this is why corn is not just a starch, it's a starch that has a lot of protein. The little bits of corn that float are the corn it's called maíz vano, which is corn that isn't good. It comes up and it's very easy to spot. You can boil corn and cook it without the limestone and you will get a paste, but it will not hold together. Nixtamalizing it also makes it flexible enough to build tortillas and to have it sort of have a structure, but also flexibility, and it keeps the moisture of the corn. When it's cooked, you can take out the skin and you can actually bite into it and it doesn't break your tooth. It's sort of a pasta al dente. You have to see the uncooked in the middle. What we're gonna do is we're gonna let this boil until you can rip the skin and sort of peel it with your nail. And that's, in the case of this corn, it's gonna take about 20 minutes, 25. If it overcooks, then your masa will not be easy to grind and it will just be a really, really sticky paste. So our corn is ready. This has already been broken into, and you can peel the skin. You see the yellow skin has been sort of torn apart, and you can get it out easily with your hands. When the skin comes off, you stop the cooking, and then you let it sit. Usually people leave it overnight. I like to leave it overnight. It doesn't hurt to have it be a little bit more soaked. And then you rinse it, and after you rinse it, you're ready to grind it. And we're gonna do this right here in the sink. And I wanna wash the corn. You wanna wash it and make sure that it's cold. It feels really soft and it feels like you wanna massage it. You shouldn't rinse all of the limestone out of it because, even if some of it has already absorbed, you want it to be limey in a way that you can taste a bit of it and also that you can have the masa be very flexible. So it's now getting cooler and cooler, so you can get your hands in there. So I'm gonna show you. So the consistency, it's sort of it's nice to touch. It's nice to the touch. And you have all the little pieces of the skin that have peeled, but you want a little bit of it. You don't want to take all of the cal because the cal also, it gives it a flavor and it also allows you to have a masa that is really malleable, which is what you want in masa, right? You want a little dough that holds together. You can eat it. Look, I'll show you. You bite into it and it's al dente. You have a white part in there, and you can eat it. It's just sort of raw. Because what happens is that this is halfway cooked, enough so that you can grind it, and then you finish cooking it. When you make the tamales, when you make the tortillas, when you make every preparation of the corn, this is what you have to start with. This is your basic nixtamalization, and then we'll go to doing different things. When my family arrived in Tepoztlan, I was 5 years old, and by the time I was 7 years old, I was mortified that my mother did not know how to make tortillas because every woman in the town of Tepoztlan, then at least, I don't know if now, but then at least, every woman knew how to make tortillas. And women would stand in the kitchen or outside of where people were eating, making tortillas while everybody else was eating. So I asked Victoria, the lady who would come and help us with the cleaning, Victoria, I really need please make tortillas. I want tortillas to be made in my house. So Victoria started making tortillas and I started learning. So she first had me just watch her. And then eventually she let me make a tortilla. And eventually she let me press them. And then after pressing them, she let me put them on the comal. So from age 7, I became the resident tortilla maker in my house. I learned early on, but it's easy to learn. It's not that difficult. I'm gonna break it down for you. But first of all, I'm gonna show you how to make the masa. This is something that you can skip if you are fortunate enough to live anywhere where you can find masa already ground. But I want to teach you how to do it from scratch. So we're going to use now a sort of home size grinder. These are actually very easy to find. They're sort of a home alternative to when you don't have a larger community and a central molino, which is how it's called. So this is our corn that has been rinsed of the water, and I'm gonna put it in the hand mill. So I'm gonna fill it up. I'm gonna add a little bit of water. This is normal water. See, I'm gonna check. I mean, this is still pretty coarse. I'm still gonna grind it a little bit thinner. You could pass it all and then pass it again. That's a way of doing it, which helps. Most people are not gonna go through the hassle of buying the heirloom corn, nixtamalizing it, grinding it. It's sort of a difficult thing. It's a nuisance thing to do at home. But if you're very much into it, you should absolutely do it because the results are very different than finding masarina in the supermarket or online. And there are all these flours that are, in the best of cases, organic corn nixtamalized and dried that you just add water to, and it's called masarina. But I have not found one that is actually very good in terms of how the tortilla tastes and how the tortilla cooks, because you need more flexibility in the masa. Usually they're kind of dry. If you can't make it yourself, second best is buy fresh masa. Third best is find an organic masarina. Fourth best is buy great tamales and tortillas made with organic heirloom corn wherever you can. If you really are interested in having amazingly good masa, this is what one has to do. You have to go through this. Okay. Okay, here goes more water, which will be messy. Okay, now I'm gonna check on this masa. And this is still coarse, but it's actually nice masa. You can still feel the grain of the corn when you press it. It does come together. You see how it blends together in a nice little paste, but it is still coarse. You can still see the pieces of the corn. I'm gonna leave it like this, and I'm gonna finish the corn that I have here, and then I'm gonna do a second grinding. Okay, so this is coming out nicely. I'm gonna grind it again to get a finer masa, but you can see that I'm getting this consistency of a very unified dough. It's not falling apart. It's still a little bit cracky because it's not as finely ground, but I'm gonna get this in the second milling process. We're getting there. It looks really delicious and it smells nice. It smells of the limestone. It's a special smell that I have learned to love, and you know that it's gonna make for good tortillas. So we're gonna get this to the right consistency, and then I'm gonna show you how to actually make the tortillas on the fire. Usually what traditionally happens in Mexican communities where corn is of great importance, there's a central mill. It's a very simple mechanism. It's a grinder with a small motor that just moves these volcanic stones that rotate, and inside the stones, the corn is ground. You add a little bit of water and you get the right consistency, and you literally get the masa.
Ya ves mi obsesión por agarrar todo. Está bueno. Esa es mi parte favorita. Eso. maíz?
Está buenísimo.
Está buenísimo, ¿verdad? Y toda la noche también lo deja, ¿no?
Sí, tiene que reposar toda la noche.
Sí, sí, sí.
Hasta que esté frío, porque si lo molemos
Caliente se hace chicloso.
La masa sale como engrudo.
Engrudo, chicloso. Sí, 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 sí.
Now, 22 years after we opened Contramar, one finds so many more places where heirloom corn is celebrated, nixtamalized, ground, and all sorts of tortillas and tamales and things that you make with corn are made. And I'm proud of deciding that when we opened Contramar, we wanted really good corn tortillas.
Listo.
When we opened Contramar, it was 1998. And at that time in Mexico, it was really difficult in the city to find fresh-made tortillas. People travel distances to go to a particular market where ladies from Milpalta or Xochimilco or rural areas around the city would make their tortillas. So when we opened Contramar, for us, it was really important to have sort of a recreation of a beach palapa in the city. What we wanted is to have tortillas being made there. And that was a sort of an innovative concept in terms of restaurants in Mexico City, in that area of the city. And there's nothing like a fresh-made tortilla. There really isn't. So we started getting corn from Morelos. Morelos is where I grew up in. And decided to do our own masa program. And we always had, it's been a staple of Contramar to have fresh-made tortillas. It was the first thing I learned to cook in terms of Mexican food, which is something I'm very proud to say and to show you. So here we have our fresh ground masa. I also have blue masa and red masa from red corn, which turns into a little bit brownish masa. This is our white masa. So as you see, I've ground it enough so that you have this really pasty consistency. And you're supposed to be able to maneuver it without it sticking too much to your fingers. But it does have to stick a little bit, because if it doesn't stick a little bit, it means that it's too dry and you won't be able to form a tortilla or anything for that matter. So I want to use the white masa to show you how to make tortillas. All the different masas don't only look different, but they actually have different tastes. If you're knowledgeable enough, you can distinguish the different notes in the varieties of corn. I think that as long as you have heirloom corn that is nixtamalized and ground fresh, whatever tortilla you make out of that is going to be superior to anything else that you might find out there. You know, it's like eating bread right out of the oven. It's the start of any good meal. This is a dough ball that it's rather small. The sizes vary in terms of what you're gonna use them for. And then, you know, you have tortillas that are this size, you have tortillas that are this size, and anything in between. And it has to do with traditions of, you know, particular of each region, of each town. In Tepoztlán, for example, tortillas are about this big, and they're usually white corn. At Contramar, I started making smaller tortillas and thicker tortillas because that's what you use in Guerrero on the coast in the Pacific. I would start with balls an ounce big, and I'm gonna show you here. I have a comal, which is a clay comal, and this is what you would usually cook your tortillas in. This would usually be this size. And you know, and you could put about 10 tortillas at the same time. And I'm gonna show you how to make a tortilla in a pan. This is a very straightforward griddle that you can find online in stores. And this is most likely what you will use, because using clay is very challenging, and it's challenging to find it, and then it cracks. So I'm gonna show you with a metal one. So here we have our little ball of masa, and I'm gonna show you how to make tortillas in this tortilla press, which I got from my mother when I was learning how to make tortillas, and I've had for years. So it's very important to start with a round ball. This is how you begin. And then you press your 3 middle fingers, and then you make sure that your hands aren't all sticky with masa, because you first press it, and then you need to get it out of the plastic pieces. So you don't want your hands to be sticky. Women who are very experimented in making tortillas make them with their hands like this. And this is called echando tortillas, or like prensando tortillas. And what this, this piece of equipment helps you do that in a beat. And you want to put it between plastic because otherwise it would get attached to the surfaces. They use, in certain communities, they use banana leaves, but nowadays we use plastic, and it's very commonly used. And I press twice because the press is not even, and most presses are not even. So you need to press twice so that the tortilla comes out even. The pan has nothing. I have added no oil, no butter. It has no fat. So I am pressing enough to make it, you really have to experiment, but I am pressing enough to make it be flat and thin, but you could press less. And now I'm gonna interrupt because I need to move it. So as soon as you see that the edges are drying, you take your tortilla and you flip it over. And this is the beginning of a good tortilla. Because if you let it dry too much on the first side, it's a disaster. So you flip it immediately before, as soon as you can pick it up, you flip it. And you might use, a spatula. You don't need to burn your hands, but actually you get used to not burning your hands pretty soon. Your comal has to be hot enough that water evaporates immediately if you throw water on it. But you also don't want to have it too hot, because if it's too hot, the tortilla will burn instead of cooking. It has to be sort of medium heat. The tortilla cooks 3 times. The first time you put it, then you flip it a first time. And that's the second cooking, which is what's happening now. And that's the longest cooking. It's sort of starting to blister, and it's very subtle. But you see that it wants to raise. They usually say, como la tortilla se quiere levantar. It really is, I'm sorry, because this sounds mysterious and unexplainable, but it starts to blister, and you will learn how to see these blisters. Then you flip it. The more tortillas you make, the better tortilla maker you will become. It's just the art of repetition. So it's ready to blow out. And usually it will do it on its own. But you can also help it by pressing a little bit and making the air get in all the edges. In Mexican towns, they would say that I would be ready to get married, because when your tortilla puffs, you're ready to get married, because you can be a housewife and you can make tortillas for your family. This is the proof of the tortilla being cooked. If it doesn't puff up, it's not cooked. And if it doesn't puff up, you either cooked it too long on the first 2 sides, or something went wrong. It needs to puff up to be a successful tortilla. This is perfectly done. It's a little bit golden in the center. This is a perfectly cooked tortilla. And I'm gonna put it in our tortillero here. This is a nice way of keeping them hot. I'm gonna show you how to make another one in the clay comal, and I hope it comes out well. The clay comal is usually used over a big fire. So now we have, this is a home stove, so we have a small source of heat, which just makes it a little bit more tricky. And I'm making another ball of masa, and it's about 1 ounce of masa, which is what we've been using. And I am, again, putting the masa inside our 2 pieces of plastic. You can't use saran wrap. It has to be a plastic that doesn't stick to itself. In this case, it's a compostable bag, but usually thicker plastic is easier. So whatever you have, but as long as it doesn't stick to itself, you will be able to press tortillas in the right way. So here we go, one side. Other side. I'm not pressing too much, just enough to make it even. And here we go again. So here I have my spatula. I'm watching the edges. This isn't a perfectly round tortilla, but it's what happens sometimes. So it's good to have mistakes be a part of this lesson. So you see how the edges are they're starting to dry. So I'm gonna wait for them to dry a little bit more, just to make sure that we really can pick it up. And I think the comal is hot enough, so I'm gonna do it very slightly. I don't need to really make a big effort. It's very, very subtle, and I'm just flipping it now. You see, the thing is that it doesn't cook evenly because the heat in the stove comes out on the sides. So the center is lacking heat. So that's where it's sticking. But it will work. I promise you it will work. Now you can move it. I'm gonna put it more on the side. Maybe in the case of a comal that is being so fussy as this one, you should put the tortilla towards the side. But you will most likely be using a metal one, and that we've figured out works. Usually comales are full of tortillas. You don't make one at a time. Now I'm taking my time to explain to you every step of the tortilla making. But actually, when you're making tortillas, you wanna be pressing and cooking, and you have to get into a rhythm. This is why tortillas are a master's task. You really, really have to make a lot of them to know how to make them well. So, you press one, put it out. While it's cooking on one side, you're pressing the second one. Sometimes a good tip is to have all your balls and you put a wet towel over them so they don't dry out. It's tricky. It's tricky, and it's a matter of testing and experimenting, and you just want to make sure that you know your comal and that you know at what temperature it actually works. It's rising. This is very good. You see here it's rising on one side. The other side is a little bit dry. You can help yourself by pressing. Pressing it makes them rise more. But here it is. This is a very uneven tortilla, but it rose, and it's now golden browning in the center. So we have a lovely tortilla that we're gonna put in our tortilla keeper, our tortillero, with the rest of our tortillas. Usually, this is the best way to keep tortillas and not slave next to the stove or the comal with tortillas while everybody else is eating. You have them in a closed container. This one has the added benefit of having a hot stone inside, which I can show you because this is a very, very, very hot stone. And you put the cloth over it, and you put the tortillas, and it serves sort of like a little oven. So the oven keeps the tortillas hot, and you can prepare them and then bring them to the table, and they will still be moist and hot and flexible. If you don't have access to a hot stone and a tortillero that looks like this, you can put cloth around the hot tortillas, and you could put a lid over them, for example. You can also put them in a cooler. You put a cloth, nice, clean cloth, inside a small cooler, and you keep your tortillas there. Anything that is sort of isolating is what you want for the tortillas to be kept hot. So I'm gonna eat this delicious tortilla. Oops. I'm gonna eat this tortilla that we made a little bit ago in this comal. And I'm gonna wrap it and make it just a little taco. And I'm gonna eat it without salt. Usually this you would eat with a little bit of salt. In this case, I chose to go the traditional way and not add any salt to the masa. But there are so many ways in which to prepare your masa. Some people add a little bit of salt to the masa, and that's an easy trick to make tortillas be tastier. A way in which to use this as a utensil is you make a triangle, and you take food, and you eat. It's like a little spoon, and you eat the tortilla while you eat your food. And they're all different ways that we use tortillas for your everyday vehicle of eating anything else. The best way to actually store tortillas for a long time is to freeze them. When they're frozen, you can heat them up and they come out really, really nicely. I would suggest that if it's only for a couple of days, you just put them in the refrigerator, because they do become acidic if you leave them outside. So you need to put them in a container where the temperature is controlled. Make sure that they're sealed so that you don't lose any of the moisture, and then heat them up. If you're not reheating them from the freezer where they have a little bit of the moisture that has frozen around, you may sprinkle a little bit of water on the tortilla to make it not be super dry. Because what you don't want in a tortilla is to have a dry tortilla. Otherwise, you might as well just dry it out and make a tostada, which is something that you will learn later. Making a homemade tortilla just communicates more care into a meal that you're gonna serve. For us Mexicans, it really takes you to so many memories of good meals, because a good meal in Mexico is always accompanied by good tortillas. Salsas are fundamental for Mexicans. Salsas, I would say, are a signature stamp of cooks, of families, of places. Usually when you go to people's homes, they have a sauce that is their home sauce. They have a sauce that their grandmother made, or that their aunt made, or that has been in the family for generations somehow. And I feel the same thing about restaurants. Restaurants have their sauces. And you go to a restaurant or to a taco stand because they have a particular sauce. It's very telling of a certain way of cooking, or of a certain tradition, a certain family, or certain locality. So I'm gonna tell you how to make salsa verde cruda. And this is one of my favorite. It's one of my staples at the restaurant. And I love it. You don't cook anything in the sauce. Everything is raw. And this is why it's called salsa verde cruda. Cruda means raw. And this is exactly what it is. So we start with tomatillos. I prefer small tomatillos because the flavor is more concentrated and they're not bitter. And I have some tomatillos here that I want to show you with the skin. This is how they grow. So they grow in the plant. This is a little stem here. And they usually are covered in the skin. If you find them like this, covered, you just clean them. And you do not need to rinse them before you use them. So now what we're gonna do is just finish peeling these. And we are going to prepare this very simple sauce by just putting everything in the blender. So here we go. The tomatillos have a very sticky sort of gel. It's a light resin that comes from the tomatillo. It's just enough that it gets your fingers dirty. So I will open the blender, put the tomatillos in here, and I put them whole, again, because they're of a very small size. The second ingredient that we're gonna use is this onion, and I'm gonna, again, chop it roughly just so that it goes into the blender and disintegrates easily. And we're gonna put all these clean cilantro leaves. So again, we're gonna do onion, tomatillos, cilantro, serrano chiles. I'm gonna de-stem them and just cut them in half so that they blend easy. Then garlic, and I'm just gonna take the part that might not blend easy, cut it in half. And the secret of the sauce is to put lettuce. And I like to use little gems, or cogollos in Spanish, and it's a very crunchy variety of lettuce. You could use romaine. Sometimes, when you're making salad and you leave the center of the lettuce, this is how I started making the sauce. I use the center of the lettuce to put into a green sauce just to give it a little bit of freshness and crispiness. And now I use little gems just because they're delicious and easy to find. And it's a good way of using up everything and not wasting. So here we have a beautiful avocado. I'm gonna use only half of it. And usually, I don't need to make sure that it's beautifully peeled, but what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna peel it in quarters and I'm gonna stick it in the blender with everything. The secret for a ripe avocado is that when you touch it lightly, you don't feel a resistance. But you don't wanna mush it, you don't wanna press it too much so that you make a guacamole inside the avocado, behind the skin. So you just wanna make sure that it's ripe enough that you can push into it and you don't feel resistance, because inside it has to be really soft that you can put a spoon into it here very easily. Sometimes the avocado is ripe around the seed, but the edges are very hard. So make sure that the edges are soft. This is exactly what should happen, that you can just take it like this. And again, as we're not gonna waste, we're gonna put this into our sauce, even if our quantities are not perfect. And we are going to put a teaspoon or a spoonful of salt. Maybe this could use a little more. I'm gonna check for flavor after we finish it, and we're just going to blend. We're gonna add no liquid. It's just gonna be the liquid inside the tomatillo. And here we go. And once I see that there are no large cilantro leaves left, I just know that it's ready. Let me see. I want to taste this for salt. Usually, it still needs a little bit more salt. So I'm gonna use one more sort of large pinch. Perfect. Okay. And this is a creamy sauce. The avocado renders sort of guacamole-y consistency. So it's either a light, very spicy guacamole or a very fresh salsa. This is your fresh salsa verde. It's a taste of the tomatillo, the avocado, the serrano, the fragrancy of the cilantro, and it just livens almost any dish that you use it with. So now I'm gonna teach you how to make a really simple but delicious and very basic Mexican sauce. You've all probably heard of habanero chiles. These are habaneros. They can come in different colors, and here we have our green habaneros, and this is what makes the sauce interesting. And we're gonna do a very fast pickle or lime pickle. In Mexico, in Mexican food, we cook many things with lime. It's a way of preserving raw foods. Habanero is very much a chile of tropical Mexico, so it's important to find ways in which to preserve them. Many times you char habaneros for a salsa. In this case, we're just gonna chop it and put it with onion and lime juice, a little bit of olive oil just to make it more, a little bit more silky, if you will. And I'm gonna use oregano, which goes very well with the onions and the habanero. So we're gonna start off, we're gonna take half an onion, just because it's enough for this recipe. I wanna show you, I wanna make long pieces of the onion, and I wanna make sure that I get all my slices through to the bottom of the onion. And that's why I cut it in half and I put the onion face down. I want all the pieces of the onion to be separated. I want them all to be marinated in the lime, in the olive oil, and I'm gonna mix them up with the habanero. So here we go. I just wanna make sure that they all separate. You see how these are all nicely separated? What I want is even pieces of the onion so that it can be marinated evenly. In a pickle, what you want to do is cook things to the degree that they can be preserved. And the lime sort of does that. And it's important for you to know that the more this marinates, the more limey it will become. And it isn't a bad thing. It will just be more tasty. So now I'm going to do the tricky part. I'm going to chop the habaneros. Just for teaching's sake, people who are very experienced in handling habaneros know that they should not touch any part of their face or body and be very mindful of the oils of the chile because they last. So I recommend using plastic gloves, and this is what I will do. The reality is that habanero does get in the way of every other flavor, and it really can be dangerous, especially if you touch your eyes afterwards. So I am gonna show you how to get an habanero sauce that will not get into your eyes and will just make for a delicious. I like to cut through the habanero perpendicularly so that you get these nice sort of slivers of it. And I want them to be very, very thin, or as thin as you can get them without breaking them, like I just did. And I use all of the seeds. I use all of the veins of the habanero. I use every part of the habanero, except for the stem. So I'm cutting all the way down there. This is a really spicy chile. Habanero is one of the spiciest chiles, and we're gonna cut through our next chile. Manzanos can also be I recommend using gloves with chiles that you know will be intense. Even if you're chopping a bunch of serrano chiles, or even if you're deveining dry chiles, if you don't want the chile oils to remain in your hands, using gloves can be a good thing. I'm very tactile, I guess, and I love handling food and feeling the consistency and the resistance of the different ingredients in my hands. So I don't like cooking with gloves, but it really is very, not only hygienic, but it's also just protective because you don't want to have spicy fingers. It will get into everything and it lasts for hours. This is a staple salsa that I have at Contramar, and we also have it at Cala in San Francisco. And it makes everything taste really good. And again, I'm putting the seeds, I'm putting everything in there. So, as I have my gloves, I can get in here and separate everything and make sure it's evenly distributed. Now, I'm gonna start using, okay, I'm done with the gloves, thank goodness. I'm gonna put salt. I'm gonna put 2 teaspoons of salt. And then I'm gonna put the oregano, and I'm gonna grind it a little bit with my hands, or just, put it through my fingers so that the aromas start coming out more. Even if you don't do this, you will get the flavor that you want. Then I'm gonna this is freshly squeezed lime juice. I always confuse lime and lemon, but this is lime juice. In Mexico, this is limon. So it's difficult for me to think of this as lime and not lemon. And I'm gonna put the same amount of lime juice that I just put in olive oil. So here we go. And I'm just gonna mix this so that it sits. And this is your sauce. We're ready to eat it now. And if you let it sit for about 20 minutes before using it to dress anything or to go on any taco, it's perfect. And again, this could last for 2 weeks in your refrigerator. So now I'm just gonna let it sit here. You can leave it as is. You could put it in a quart container. You can cover it and wait to use it in 2 days, or you can serve it immediately. I'm just gonna have it sit in the bowl where I'm gonna present it. This habanero onion sauce is called a salsa brava, and I recommend it with tacos al pastor for sure. I would recommend it with so many things. Sopes, seafood, tostadas. It's also beautiful, and depending on the color of the habanero, you get a different salsa every time, because habaneros tend to have a variation of colors. Yellows, greens, oranges, and it's just a nice salsa, and it's very fragrant. The dry oregano, when it's enlivened by the olive oil and the lime, it's really delicious. So this can be made with white onions, and it can also be made with red onions, which are very typical from the lands where habanero grows. And this I just did with white onion because this is what we did at Contramar when we opened it, and we still have the same salsa. I am going to teach you how to make al pastor. Al pastor is a marinade that we usually in Mexico use with pork meat, but it has now become so popular. It's a very Mexico City thing. And it's basically a rub. It starts off with chiles, and I have these chiles here. We have chile ancho, chile pasilla, chile guajillo, chile de árbol, chile cascabel. I'm going to devein these, so we destem them and take the seeds out. This is gonna avoid the sauce from being extra spicy. I mean, it's gonna have its flavor, but it's not gonna be as spicy. Isn't this lovely? This is a rattle chile. It's called cascabel, which is a rattle, because it rattles. I would not recommend that you give it to your baby, but it is a really nice rattle. But your hands will be very, very, very dangerously spicy if you touch this. The name comes from how they look, right? Pasilla, like a raisin. Anyway, so I am gonna swap this for a set of chiles that have already been destemmed, and I'm gonna put them in the comal that has already been heated, and I'm gonna toast them for a little bit as the base for our al pastor sauce. And I'm just gonna leave it a little bit over the comal. The toasting of the chiles allows for them not to be rubbery, so it's gonna be easier to grind them. But I just want them, oof, it's so nice. The aromas coming out of the chiles are delicious. And make sure that you have an exhaust. That's enough. I am using a comal. If you don't have a comal, you can use a regular pan. I'm gonna liberate the aromas, and you wanna make them less rubbery. The ancho actually can take more, so I'm gonna leave that one to the end. Then we're gonna open our blender. Here we go. Okay, we're gonna put all our chiles. I'm gonna put the whole tomato. I'm not even gonna bother taking out the core. These are all the ingredients. You have them on the list. And it's a very straightforward marinade that we use for everything. At the restaurant, we use it. You can have it at your home and use it for different things that you're gonna cook. It holds up, so you can actually keep it in the fridge for a little bit. I'm gonna just make sure that you have garlics. The garlic is in huge pieces. Then I'm gonna take out a few of the seeds. So al pastor is a recipe that is very typical of Mexico City, but it actually comes from the meat being roasted on a spit, and a marinade that uses ingredients from the southeast of Mexico, from the lands of tropical Yucatan. And we use a paste of anato, achiote paste. I'm gonna put a little bit of the orange juice in the achiote paste, just so that it dissolves a little bit better. And I'm gonna use a spoon for this. And I'm just gonna let it sit there for a little bit. So on the streets of Mexico, you find many iterations of al pastor. Al pastor is a very traditional dish of Mexico City. It's actually, people have talked about al pastor as the dish of Mexico City food. And it's a street food. If people go for tacos on the street, al pastor, nobody has a spit in their house except for if they're having a big party with more than 100 people, which happens in Mexico. But you usually do not have people cooking this at home. So what I'm giving you is a proportion that is easy to make at home and that you can keep at home and that you can make sure to finish at home. Usually the al pastor spits are huge, and you can feed 1,000 people with a trompo, or maybe 500 people with a trompo. But I truly recommend having this at home because it makes any dish delicious and tasty, and it has this little tangy orange that dissolves the anato, the achiote paste, and it's a little bit sweet, it's a little bit salty. I put cumin, I put oregano, I put a little bit of salt, I put the chiles that you saw, and this orange juice. I'm just squeezing these oranges as we go because I'm just using one of them. And it has garlic, onion, tomato, a little bit of grapeseed oil just to give it some unctuosity. You want it to be nice and smooth so you can rub it on meat or you can rub it on fish. We're gonna make our tacos al pastor with pork shoulder. And I'll show you, it's the simplest thing to marinate these. Al pastor has been considered like a Mexico City staple dish for quite some years. And it comes from the influence of the shawarma because the meat is cooked on a spit that rotates. And it's really cooked just the same as shawarma. So I guess it's our Middle Eastern, specifically Lebanese influence in this country, which is great. Okay, so everything is in the blender, and I'm gonna start blending it. This is a very modern Vitamix. A really good blender is basic for the chiles. I really recommend that you invest in a good blender for this sauce. Beautiful. Okay, and here we've just attained a really lovely silky sauce. You can smell the acidity of the onion, the garlic, the orange, blended with the achiote, which gives it the color. And the chiles, you want the chiles to be disintegrated. You want the chiles to be you want it to be as smooth as possible. You can go on and have it be even smoother, but you don't really need it to be smoother. Every particle is very small. What is important about al pastor is that whatever meat you use is very well marinated in this sauce. You want all of the meat or all of the vegetables to really get that acidity, get that flavor, the smokiness of the chiles. So I usually leave meat, especially, at least 24 hours in the fridge, and you just let it sit, make sure that it's well mixed. This is our pork shoulder, and I am going to take a little bit of this. I'm gonna take about 3 tablespoons from here, and I'm just gonna marinate this in this sauce. And we're gonna keep the rest of the sauce. We're gonna make more recipes with it. And also you can keep it at home. It keeps for about 3 weeks in the fridge. It's absolutely very long lasting. And I recommend that you do one batch and you use it up for other things. This is a portion for about 4 people. And for the time being, this is enough. We're gonna put this in the fridge. And we're gonna store the rest of the sauce, the remaining sauce, for other recipes. And as I said, you can use it for so many things. For vegetables, for fish, for potatoes, sweet potatoes. You can bake it, you can cook it on the grill. I'll show you how to finish up the al pastor in just a bit. So here we have the marinated pork. It's been sitting 24 hours in the fridge, and it's ready. It smells delicious. You have the little orange tang that helps it all come together. And now I'm gonna do the staple of al pastor is pineapple. Of all things, pineapple. They use a pineapple to put at the top and at the bottom of the spit. So the flavor of the pineapple, sort of the juices of the pineapple make the meat a little bit sweet. And for home use, and even at the restaurant, when you don't have a spit, what you can do is just cook the pineapple with a little bit of butter and salt, and this is what we're gonna do right now. Tips on how to cut a pineapple are really variable. People cut pineapples in so many different ways. Like in Hawaii, they do it one way. And depends on the size of the pineapple. This is a huge pineapple. So what I would do is I would cut the edge of it, and then I'm gonna cut through through the peel of it, it has all these stems. They look like stems. But it doesn't matter if you leave a little bit of it for this al pastor preparation that we're gonna make. I recommend using a very sharp knife because the peel of a pineapple is tough. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut it in half. And as I said, you do need a sharp knife because otherwise you'll go astray. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna reserve this for later. And I'm gonna cut. When I'm cutting pineapple, I like to cut it lengthwise because then you get the sweetest part and the part that isn't as sweet. In the case of this recipe, we're gonna use just a little bit for the quantity of pork that we have. I'm gonna take out the heart, the central part, which is tougher. You don't want that in the concoction that we're preparing. And I want to show you how to get triangles of pineapple. And if you get a little bit of a dark part, I would take it out just so that you get nice, clean pieces. I have always been curious of how the pineapple came to be such an important part of the al pastor preparation. And my theory, it's not clear. Everybody says it's because of the flavor, it's because of the sweetness, because the pineapple is a sweet fruit and the pastor is kind of tangy and sweet and spicy also, but I believe the pineapple is also used just to hold up the meat on the spit. You have a piece of the pineapple at the top, you have a piece of the pineapple at the bottom, and the juices do render, the sweetness, but I think it's also an instrument for holding it up. So what I'm gonna do here is I believe we have, okay, I'll just finish this here. I want to make sure that we have enough pineapple for this meat, and I think this is more than enough. And I'm gonna turn my fire on. So I am gonna put a little bit of butter in the pan. I want the butter to give the pineapple a little bit of the fat that it usually has, because the way that you eat an al pastor is you put a tortilla, and then you put the meat, and then you put a slice or a little piece of the pineapple. But the pineapple is usually already, it has the fat of the meat. So butter is a good alternative for it, and I've found that it really gives it a very good flavor. So I'm gonna leave the pineapple with the butter. This is what we do at the restaurant because, as I said, we don't have a spit in every restaurant. I add butter, a little bit of salt, and that is it. Pinch of salt. So this is gonna cook for about 15 to 20 minutes. And once this is ready and the pineapple is cooked and softened and the butter is really in there, we can add it to our al pastor preparation. Here we have our pineapple that has reduced and gotten really, really yellow. You can see that now it's ready for being put over an al pastor taco. I'm gonna turn this heat off and I am gonna proceed to our meat. We're gonna salt our meat a little bit more because what I put in the marinade was very little salt. And it actually takes about 1 tablespoon of salt. And the only thing I did was 2 pinches. So I'm gonna mix it up again. The reason I put the salt at the end is so that the meat doesn't lose its liquid. If you salt it too much at the beginning when you let it marinate, it's gonna brine it more than just marinate it. It's gonna take a lot of the liquid out of the meat. So I want it to be nice and moist, and this is why I salt it right before I put it on the pan. Okay, so I am gonna mix it up. And you can do it with your hands, it's just they're gonna get really red and the achiote gets under your nails, and I prefer not to have that happen. So I'm gonna mix it up with my spoon. And while the pan gets ready, here we are, it's starting to get hot. I'm gonna use grapeseed oil so that the meat doesn't stick. And you can see when the pan is hot, it starts immediately spreads out and the oil looks even thinner. So I would heat the pan, put the oil, make sure that the oil does not burn. The grapeseed oil has a high smoke point, but you don't want to overdo it. So as soon as you know that the pan is hot and you can see that the oil is sort of spreading around, you put your meat in. Try not to make a splash. And here we go. I am cooking this meat at a medium-high level. I usually use a pan that's thicker. I like cooking meat in a pan that is thicker. This is a fast cook because the pork is already sliced thin, so you don't need a lot of heat to make it all be cooked through. You do want pork to be cooked through. Specifically in the case of pork and chicken or turkey, you want it to be cooked through. We're getting a lovely, very attractive, delicious smelling, reddened, not too red, pork meat. Some al pastor really overdo it with achiote. Some pastor taquerias also use food coloring because they want them to be red, red, red. I don't necessarily want them to be that red, so I don't want to over season it with achiote. I feel it's a very balanced marinade. I am gonna put this off, turn this off because it's ready. Achiote is the seed called anato, and it comes from the Yucatan Peninsula. And you grind it. It's a spice that is very common there. It's sort of a pepper, and it's made into a paste with usually a little bit of vinegar or orange juice. But when it's made to last, they use a vinegar. I find that the paste, if you have a good purveyor of the paste, is good enough. If you want to do it from scratch, if you want to make it from scratch and grind your own achiote, then you will be sure of the traceability of your sauce. So I've cooked the pork for about 7 minutes. You don't want to overcook it because if you overcook it, it's going to get tough. And it smells really good. Between the pork meat and the fat and the anato and all the spices that we put into the sauce, the aroma is really enticing. So we're almost ready to plate. We're gonna let it sit for a minute while I heat the tortillas, and then we're gonna plate our delicious tacos. So now we're ready to heat up our tortillas that we made earlier. And the way we're gonna do this is, again, we're gonna use our clay comal. And this is a little bit hot. It's gonna get hot very soon. I'm just gonna put I'm gonna make 3 tacos. I like uneven numbers for food. I don't know why. Usually tacos are sold individually. And people ask for 5 tacos, 4 tacos, 6 tacos, 2 tacos. I like to plate 3. So this is what I'm gonna do. So the comal is just heated. It's the same comal that we made the tortillas on. You don't add oil, you don't add anything, you don't need to. We're putting our tortillas on the plate. We're making it ready here. We're adding a little bit of the meat on each taco. And this meat looks really delicious. I like to put enough meat that you have a bite in each bite. And, sometimes people use 2 tortillas. It's very common for the al pastor tortilla to be very thin. So sometimes people use 2 tortillas. And this meat will yield for about, I would say, 8 tacos of this capacity. Maybe a little less because I'm being quite generous with it. I'm gonna put a little bit of the pineapple on each taco. I would put about 3 pieces on each. Again, my uneven number thing, I don't know why I have it. I just think food looks nicer that way. And then we're gonna add cilantro and onion. And cilantro and onion are a staple of Mexican street food for sure. So we have very finely chopped raw white onion, and we're putting a little bit of that over the meat. And then we're gonna put a little bit of cilantro And this is just cilantro leaves, very finely chopped. We're gonna serve it with our salsa verde cruda, which is a raw green sauce. And we're gonna accompany it with some lime. There you go, 1 lime per taco. And I am gonna prepare myself this taco. Usually I like to put sauce on the side so that everybody decides how much sauce to put on their taco. I am choosing the salsa verde cruda for this al pastor recipe because it adds freshness. It's really sort of vibrant and intense, but not heavy, which really balances the meat. So here we go. This is a big taco. I would recommend using a little bit less meat, but it's gonna be a very good bite. I have to say, this salsa verde is really badass. So good. So this taco is a really delicious bite of sort of sweet, sour, spicy, meaty, fresh, and very bright taste of Mexico City for me. It really tastes of Mexico City. And this is, this tastes clean. Some tacos are a little bit more fatty, have a little bit more burnt edges, so they have a little bit more of smokiness. But this is a really good bite. The only rule for eating a taco is that once you have it ready, you don't put it down, you just finish it. I have a theory that truly anything can be a taco. And with this heritage of mine, I remember that one of my favorite tacos growing up was butter and anchovy paste, which is non-traditional Mexican for sure, or butter and jam, or we even made peanut butter and jelly tacos. Or a spaghetti, like leftover spaghetti taco, which is the most absurd concept. But a good tortilla can hold anything. My favorite taco is a salad taco. And I'm giving you the recipe for a really good salad to put into a taco. It's nopales and watercress, and you'll get that in the recipe book. As long as the tortilla is good, go ahead and experiment. Pescado a la talla is our most popular dish at Contramar for sure. It was the first dish on the menu, and it is a dish that comes directly from the Pacific Ocean from a place called Troncones, very close to Zihuatanejo, in the state of Guerrero. We serve catch of the day with a rub of red chile sauce, which is a sauce that we made already. It's an adobo, literally. And you use it for pescado a la talla. It's the only sauce that you use for pescado a la talla traditionally. Different dried chiles, a little bit of tomato, garlic, onion. And on the other side, we have a green parsley garlic sauce. I love this dish, especially because it's sort of my ancestry put together. One side has the red Mexican spicy sauce, and the other side has the green, more mild and more Mediterranean or Italian side. It's also a very good alternative for somebody to eat fish in a very Mexican way, but without the spiciness and the chile component. So now I'm gonna teach you how to make the salsa verde. And the salsa verde is, as I said, basically parsley. And this is clean, dry parsley. A little bit of the stems, not too many. And we are gonna put olive oil so that we can mix it. We're gonna use an immersion blender this time. We're gonna put onion and garlic. I'm gonna use a little bit of black pepper, just a tiny bit, and cumin. The center of Mexico, we don't use that much cumin. However, the pescado a la talla, the rub, does have cumin, and we integrated this to give it sort of an earthy flavor that brings it all together. I really think that when we haven't used cumin, you can really feel the absence, even if it's not that present. Like, you can't really distinguish it if you don't have a very refined palate, but it really makes a difference to put it. So I recommend you don't pass that one. Then we're gonna put salt. I'm using coarse salt. And you always want your sauces to be a little bit salted because you want them to have a flavor in themselves. And I'm gonna start with the immersion blender. The end result will be a smooth green sauce, pretty much the consistency of the red one that we already have. So we finally blended all this parsley, and we're gonna transfer it to our bowl here. And parsley is very fibery, so you will find it's sort of a fibery sauce. You need to know that so that you don't feel you haven't blended enough. Okay, so here we have our green sauce next to our red sauce, which is the adobo that we use for the tacos al pastor. We don't have to make it again because it's the same sauce. Usually this fish is cooked over fire on a grill. At Contramar, we make it that way. And I'm gonna show you a home version of this. We're gonna put a little bit of oil on this tray just because I don't want it to stick. This is a beautiful cabrilla that you can recognize because of these dots. So I'm gonna open it up. This is already butterflied, which means cut so that you have taken away the spine and you have the two fish fillets. And it is a very fresh fish. One of the very important ways in which to know if your fish is fresh is the clarity, the clearness of the eye. And this is really clear. And of course, the smell is super important. This is already clean of the insides, so you wouldn't really know how fresh it is if it weren't for the consistency of the meat and for the clarity of the eye. And for, of course, the smell. It is a fish that smells of fish, but in a fresh way. If you have a fishmonger or a butcher that you trust, which is the way to go in terms of buying seafood, you should be able to ask them to cut it this way. It's very straightforward. You want to take out the spine so that you don't have bones left in this fish. I would ask my fishmonger to provide some kind of snapper type fish. And this is, you want a fish that is 3 to 4 pounds, because also if it's larger, it's very difficult to make it home. So we're gonna salt the fish. After we put a little bit of salt over it, we're gonna start with our red sauce. And it's literally a rub. And this is the meaning of the a la talla, to tallar something, is to rub something. I always think one should apply restraint to condiments. It's the way to actually get more of each ingredient that you have. And I'm gonna do the green sauce. You see how this parsley is, it's sort of a thick sauce, but it still has the silkiness from the olive oil that allows you to get this mix rubbed onto the fish. And as I said before, this is not a traditional Mexican talla rub, but it is an homage to my mom and my mom's side of the family, who are not big chile eaters, or Italians in general are not massive fans of very spicy food. A little bit of spice is fine, But also, somehow, Italians are not fond of cilantro. So I wanted to make a green sauce that didn't include cilantro. And that's how we came to the parsley. So this fish is ready to go into the oven. We've made sure that it won't stick to the pan. And now I'm gonna take it to this oven. See how beautiful it is? Let's see if it turns out well. Now I'm gonna teach you how to make refried black beans. We haven't spoken very much about beans, but beans are a very basic part of the Mexican diet. We eat a lot of beans. And these here are midnight black beans that have been cooked with onion and garlic and epazote leaves. And a very common way of eating beans is to have them refried. And refried means they've been cooked and you fry them in usually lard, pork lard. And at Contramar, because I've always wanted it to be a restaurant where vegetarians could eat, I refry them, not with pork lard, but with vegetable oil. So this is what I'm gonna teach you how to make. These are dry beans that we make from scratch. It's very easy to make beans. You just stick everything in a pressure cooker. You don't need to soak them. You don't need to do anything to them other than have a good bean to begin with. Dry beans, as long as they're sourced properly, which is, you know that they're very good quality, are a guarantee to make really, really good soupy beans. And for refrying, I like to put a little bit of minced onion with the vegetable oil. It gives it a sweetness that is very nice. So I am going to start my fire here while I blend the beans. I would absolutely recommend that you start beans from scratch. From scratch by meaning you buy good beans. In the United States, you can widely find Rancho Gordo beans online. Actually, they only sell online and they ship everywhere. And they are an extraordinary company that sources the best beans, and they have so many varieties. And they've specialized in Mexican varieties of beans. So I would absolutely urge you to go for something like that. Canned beans are mushy, and I know they can do the trick. And they can do the trick, especially if you do this step. So if you fry a little bit of onion with vegetable oil, and then you blend canned beans, you can get a good result. But it's gonna be nothing like fresh beans that are really good quality. And the only way to know that a bean is good quality is to make sure that they're not old. And the way to know that is if when you put them in cold water, they stay down. When they go up, they're not good beans. Fresh beans are also delicious, but they're very difficult to come by. And it's only a very seasonal thing. But dry beans are really an extraordinary way of preserving. It's like corn. Dry corn lasts for the rest of the year until you have your next crop. And so do beans. So we're gonna start off by cooking our onion here, just so it gives it an extra added sweetness. You want to use enough oil so that the onion really does not dry out. So we're going to use our little immersion blender because we're not going to blend all of the beans. And you want to blend everything in it. You want to get the epazote in there, the onion, the garlic. You want to get all of what you cooked. And you can see it really, the garlic, the onion, they really disintegrate when you cook them. But they definitely add to the flavor. So you want to make sure that you have all of that. Okay, I am gonna start blending this. And I always like to use a cloth, just as with the blender. You want them to be super, super smooth. You want them to be sort of a little paste. It's not a heavy paste. Depending on what part of Mexico you're in, sometimes refried beans will really be like a lump, like very, very solid. I want to make our beans silkier, and I want to make sure that you can take them with a spoon, and when they're cold, they're not a rock. And you want your onion to turn transparent before you put the mix of beans, and it usually does better with a medium temperature. I think we're gonna go ahead and put our beans in there. They're done. This is the consistency that you want, is watery, and it isn't a thick paste. I mean, you could keep on cooking it until it really evaporates, but I don't want that. I want the really silky, easy to put on a taco with our delicious pescado a la talla that should be ready very soon. Okay, we're gonna keep on cooking these just for a second. I would definitely insist on checking for salt at this point. It's important not to over salt beans, especially if you want them to accompany, for example, a delicate fish, which is what we want them for in this case. And then you have the sauces, which will have a lot of flavor, and you already have the rubs on the fish. So you want the beans to sort of be an accompaniment to all of this and a binding element for your taco. I think we're ready to go pick up the fish from the oven. The beans are ready. I mean, I could keep on cooking them and they just get thicker and thicker. We're not gonna burn the beans at this temperature. The only thing that happens with the beans is that the consistency changes. It will happen even if I stop cooking it now. They will get a little bit more solid. Okay, I'm gonna turn this off. I'm gonna go get my fish, which is ready. Okay, so here we are. I took the fish from the oven around 20 minutes after I'd put it in, and it was perfectly cooked. The way you know the fish is cooked is you need to make sure that the meat that you see has turned white, sort of a solid white, and you can see it through the sauce. It's cooked through. Then if you open a piece of it, you can see that it's thoroughly cooked. You don't want it to overcook because you never want fish to be dry. And this is such a generous way of cooking it. You know, the sauce with the oil really renders a lot of flavor to it, so it's very difficult to ruin this fish. And now it's time to make sure that our beans are well seasoned. So nice. I love beans. I really feel that beans are so underappreciated. And they are such an important part of what we eat. I couldn't think of a taco or a torta without beans, seriously. We're gonna use a little bit of ocosingo cheese just for a little bit of acidity and decoration so that the beans are not that attractive. Black beans are, in general, a sort of a sad sight. Then you try them and you realize how delicious they are. So we're using ocosingo cheese, which is a traditional cheese from the highlands of Chiapas. It has a very distinct acidity that goes really well with the earthiness of the beans. So here we have our beans, our salsa tatemada, our salsa brava, our salsa verde cruda, and of course, lime. And the most important thing, we have delicious fresh-made tortillas with the different color masas that we looked at earlier. So we have the brown tortillas, the blue tortillas, and the yellow tortillas. I'm gonna keep back hot, nice and hot in our tortillero. And we're ready to eat a taco of delicious pescado a la talla. I encourage you to eat this at home just as you would on a palapa by the beach. Get a tortilla, put some beans, put the fish. You can mix the green fish with the red fish, or you could choose one of the two so that you get a sense of each of them. I would absolutely recommend using beans with both of them. Squeeze a little lime over the fish, and then put your favorite salsa and eat it. super typical of Mexican culture, I think, in general, to start the day off with eggs cooked with meat, with different vegetables, with tortillas. So right now, we're about to make huevos rancheros. And we're gonna make huevos rancheros divorciados. And this is divorced huevos rancheros. And divorce just comes from using a green sauce and a red sauce. So I'm gonna make green sauce, and it's gonna be green baked sauce. And I have tomatillos that have been washed, peeled and washed, onion, garlic, chile serrano. For the red one, I'm gonna have tomatoes, chile serrano, garlic, onion. I'm gonna put a little bit of water so that they cook in the oven. They steam a little bit. And then we're gonna cover them. And I'm gonna use aluminum foil. You want them to steam. So you want them to be really fitted and tightly covered. So we have our green sauce preparation here. We have our red sauce preparation here. I'm leaving the tomatoes and the tomatillos whole just because there really is no reason to cut them up. I want them to maintain the juices. I want to have all of the juices of the tomatillos and the tomatoes in the sauce. So I want to roast them whole. Now I'm gonna take our red one here to the oven. Okay, we have the oven at 180 centigrade, which is 350 Fahrenheit. There we go. I'm gonna cover this again, bring the green sauce. I don't wanna lose the heat. So we're gonna leave these in the oven for half an hour. And meanwhile, we do nothing. So here are roasted tomatillos, onions, garlic, serrano, tomatoes, onion, garlic, serrano, ready to go. I'm gonna put them in the blender. I'm gonna make sure that we get all the juices in the blender as well, because that's what's gonna make the sauce be liquid enough. So we're blending all these quantities, the whole content of the tray in the blender here. And we're adding cilantro. You want the green sauce to be really green, and the cilantro gives it that. We're gonna put 2 leaves of epazote, just because epazote has this lovely taste. And we're gonna add a big pinch of salt, because you want the sauce to be tasty. Okay, so here we go. Our rag, just to make sure that our sauce does not explode on us. And we're gonna start at this. I'm just having fun with the blender. Okay, so here's our green sauce. You want to blend it until everything is incorporated, and you don't want to leave chunks of the tomatillo or the onion or the serrano pepper. You particularly don't want just a piece of serrano. So there you go. I'm always very neurotic about using up everything. I think it's a good practice, especially with so many people not being as privileged as we are to have all these beautiful, fresh ingredients all the time. So, you most likely will not find tomatillos in your grocery store if you live in cold parts of the world during the winter, for example. You know, you make a different type of salsa for huevos rancheros in the winter, or when you don't have access to fresh tomatoes or fresh tomatillos. I would recommend waiting for fresh tomatillos whenever you find them. And they are more accessible in general in the world, just because Mexican food is more, I guess, more popular, so you have them in more parts of the world. I've never had good canned tomatillos. Tomatillos they really lose that acidity. You know, if tomatoes are well preserved, they still have that sweetness and they still have that complexity, and you can even roast them, or you can even add the complexity of the roasted onions and garlic and chile and get that into the salsa. But tomatillos really have to be fresh. So here we have our delicious green sauce. And we should taste it for salt in a bit. I'll taste the two of them together. And now we're gonna make our red roasted tomato sauce. There we go. You can use these salsas for different things. They are nice with breakfast dishes just because it's nice to have, for example, with chilaquiles, you wanna have a cooked salsa. For huevos rancheros, you wanna have a cooked salsa. But they're good for enchiladas, they're good for quesadillas. They're sort of just good salsas. I'm gonna make it here, cover it up, and here we go. I forgot the salt. So I just wanna add it now so that it's well blended in. And again, I'm gonna do like 2 big pinches. So again, the sweetness of the tomato is easier to preserve than the acidity of the tomatillo, I think. Done. So I think if you don't have access to fresh tomatoes or tomatillos, I would definitely go for the red sauce because you can find good tomatoes that are canned well and preserved with as much of the flavor as is possible to keep. I want to show you how. Okay, this is again, blend all the ingredients. We have a little bit left over, which we will keep for later. And now you have your green sauce, your red sauce. These are your 2 salsas for the huevos divorciados, the green, the red, and I am going to taste them to adjust for salt. Good. Perfect. So here we have our 2 pans heating up. I'm gonna use grapeseed oil to fry tortillas for the huevos rancheros. I just want enough for the tortillas to heat and be more moist with the oil. And I'm gonna make the eggs with olive oil. So I'm using olive oil for the eggs because I like the flavor of the eggs cooked in olive oil. And I'm using grapeseed oil for the tortilla because you don't need to waste olive oil in the tortilla. So I am gonna use our brown tortillas with a masa made with the red corn. And I'm gonna just pass them in the oil for a tiny bit. You can use day-old tortillas if you keep them well. And again, the only thing you want is to heat them up here. The oil is ready for the egg. So I'm gonna discard I always want to use organic eggs with, that have been, of chickens that have been running around cageless. Free-range chickens are always my choice. It's always good to put them in a bowl before putting them in the pan, just because you can make sure that they're always fresh. So I'm gonna use a plate, and I'm gonna take the tortilla. Before the tortilla dries out, you want it to be a little bit crispy, but not hard crispy. You want it still to be a little bit soft. That's why it's important to use fresh tortillas. So you let it drain for a little bit, but a little bit of the fat is nice. So I'm gonna use the 2 tortillas. I wanna use 1 for each egg. I wanna cover these tortillas with beans, refried black beans. And as you're not gonna see them, I can get away with using tortillas that you cannot distinguish from the beans. Usually, if you were gonna see this, I would suggest a different color tortilla. So I am going to let it drain of the oil because you don't want it to be that greasy. And here we go. Okay. And then I am gonna put a little bit of salt here. I think it's gonna be very good. I always like to have huevos rancheros with 2 sauces. I always like to leave the egg yolk apparent so that you sort of surround the egg in salsa. And this salsa is spicy, so you can adjust the salsa to be less spicy if you're not very keen on having huevos rancheros be very spicy. And in general, I say you could use any sauce of your choice. I like to use hot sauces for huevos rancheros. This is how they should be served. And I am going to finish these with a little bit of queso fresco. Good. So this, for me, is a perfect breakfast. It has the beans, the tortilla, the eggs. So you have protein, you have starch, you have a little bit of the cheese, and you can use different types of cheese. You can use like a dry ricotta, you can use feta, you can use queso fresco, you can use panela. There are so many types of cheese you can use. And if you don't eat cheese, you don't need to put the cheese. They're good even without the cheese. It's just a nice way of finishing them up. It adds a little bit of saltiness to it, and I really recommend it. It's my favorite breakfast. Right now, I'm gonna show you how to make a salsa roja tatemada or a salsa tatemada because it's not only red. We, in Mexican food, very often have charred flavors in our food. Tatemada means burnt or blistered, more accurately, blistered. And this is a sauce that we make with tomatillo, with tomato, with onion, with garlic, and with these different chiles. So we're gonna start by, this is our serrano, which is fresh. These are our dried versions of the chiles. I'm gonna start by de-stemming them, and I'm gonna de-vein them just because I don't want them to be extra spicy. You see here, they are 2 very similar chiles. And this is the fresh version, serrano, and this is the dry version. And when it's dried, it's called morita because the color becomes like berry. So mora means berry, and this is chile morita. And it's one of my favorite ways. I love serrano, I love fresh serrano, but morita, love it. I'm gonna leave a little bit of the seeds. And I'm gonna put it on the hot comal. This has to be really hot because you want things to char. The whole point of the sauce is that you get the flavor of the charring. So I'm gonna leave the fresh serrano. I'm gonna keep on de-stemming these just so I can take out more of the seeds. And if you're having trouble de-seeding them, you can cut through them because in any case, we're gonna mash it all up. So it really doesn't matter if it doesn't look perfect. For example, this one is being difficult, so I'm gonna cut through it as I did with the first one, and then you open it and you know, there go the seeds. Or at least most of the seeds. You know, many times you see the chile, even if it's a dry chile, it has these veins. And this is many times where the spice is, even so, than in the seeds, or even more so than in the seeds. You see, sometimes I just can't speak English, I'm sorry. Sometimes it doesn't do the trick. Okay, so we're gonna start with these chiles. And at the same time, I'm gonna, here we go. I'm gonna do the garlic. When you roast chiles, any chile, it's gonna be very smoky and it's gonna be hard on your eyes, nostrils, throat. You better have an exhaust or an open window because the aroma is intense. You want to roast them just so that the skin becomes less leathery. And I have some water here simmering. I'm gonna put the chiles in there to soften them, and I'm gonna have that water be infused with all the aromas of the chile. I wanna turn it off. I don't wanna cook them. I just wanna soak them there so that we have the aromas come out and the skin softened. You can do 10 to 15 minutes at least, but you could also let them soak for 4 hours and it's fine. What you want is to make sure that you can mash up the skin. So you want to break the fibers of the chile when you grind it for the salsa. And in order to do that, you need it to be softer because otherwise it's really resistant. Even in a blender, it can be really hard to disintegrate chiles. We have, if you have a good blender, you can do it. But as I am gonna make a salsa in a molcajete, and this is just a stone, volcanic stone that I'm gonna mash everything in, I want it to be super, super soft. Okay, so the garlic is going. I wanna do onion now. And I wanna make small pieces of onion because I want them to, again, be able to really disintegrate easily in the molcajete. I don't want them to be huge and not easy to eat. Let's see, here we go. The word tatemada literally means blistered or burnt. So you don't necessarily have to, for example, if you don't like garlic, you don't necessarily have to put the garlic. But tatemada just means that everything you put into it is roasted. You can make an habanero tatemado. You can make a sauce with different chiles. Now I just chose a very straightforward serrano in the raw form, serrano in the dry form, which is a morita, tomatoes, onions, and tomatillos. And then at the end, I'm gonna use a little bit of fresh cilantro just to make it more fragrant, because otherwise it can be overwhelmingly smoky and sort of earthy. So I wanna make it, I wanna give it that lightness, but I also wanna make sure that all the flavors are really deep and you get the richness of the charred vegetables. And again, you can put anything, but the building blocks of sauce are, of course, a chile and onion and garlic. And then from there, you can do different spices, different herbs, different vegetables. So what's happening here is that I'm cooking everything in the comal. Salsas can be raw or cooked. And you can cook things in a pot in water and sort of, simmer them. Or you can cook them in the comal. And this is exactly what I'm doing. And I'm gonna start putting my garlic in the molcajete because it's ready. And now I'm gonna cut the fresh chile so that I have it here ready. This is the raw serrano, and I'm gonna use the seeds of this one because I de-seeded all the others, and I do want the sauce to be a little bit spicy. So I'm, Chile always is intense. So the serrano will make the sauce spicy. Also, the skin of the other chiles will make it spicy. The most popular raw chiles are serrano and jalapeño, and of the two, serrano is definitely the most spicy. Okay, so high heat, really hot comal. We're roasting the inside of our fresh serranos. I'm gonna put our tomatillos in here. I'm gonna put our tomatillos, and these I'm just gonna put as they go because they're gonna blister nicely. I wanna take out the stems of the tomato this time because I don't want them to be tough in the salsa. So, de-stemming the tomato. And this is a good tip for the home cook. Just cut it in half in a slanted way, and I'll show you. Cut it in half, not in a perfect half, so that you have only one side of it with the stem, and then you cut through a little triangle, and it's out. And then you don't have to do it twice. It's all about efficiency when you cook. So not every sauce combines tomatoes and tomatillos. Tomatillos are a very typical Mexican cousin of the red tomato that we know. You have purple tomatillos, you have yellow tomatillos, but the most common for sure is the green. And we use all of them for sauces. I always feel that when foreigners have Mexican food, they're always surprised or intrigued by the fact that we don't have very many vegetables or raw vegetables in our diet. And, you know, Mexicans eat vegetables in sauce. I mean, not all sauces are raw, but many sauces really do have an amount of greens that people get their vitamins from. Especially chile. Chile is a very nutritious vegetable. Very, 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 very extremely. Now, I just turned the serrano, so I roasted them a little bit on the middle inside. And then now I'm roasting the skin because I want it to blister and I want it to get really nice and charred. Chiles in general, fresh chiles, are full of vitamin C and antioxidants. So they're really healthy. And what is interesting is that the Mexican basic diet, sort of, you know, corn and tortillas and other iterations of corn, and chiles and beans are a really complete diet. Very nutritious, highly, highly nutritious, low in carbs, and high in protein and fibers. And I'm gonna tell you a little bit about the milpa. And the milpa is important in salsas because the milpa is a crop of land where farmers traditionally grew corn and beans, which grow together, and squash, and chiles, and you had, you know, animals, chickens, turkeys, eating, and that would fertilize the ground. So it's a whole biodiverse system where you grow many different crops that complement each other. So, for example, the beans give nitrogen to the earth, and that avoids bugs from getting into the corn. And then the corn makes enough shade for the squash and for the beans as well. And then the chiles are around, and the chiles are also a deterrent for birds and butterflies. So it's really, do you say deterrent? No? Yeah? Okay, good. And you see, all this time, the dry chiles are soaking, and you want pieces of little charred onions because they add a lot of the flavor. You can use a clay comal, you can use a metal comal, you can use a whatever comal. You can also use just a pan. So the molcajete is a traditional way of mashing. And there's all these jokes of like, oh, I want a blender, and the husband arrives with a molcajete. Like, oh, I mean, there are all these stupid jokes about how molcajetes are our local blender. These are volcanic stones. This is one that I've been using for years. But usually you start off with very clean volcanic rock, and it's very traditional of the Central Valley of Mexico. And the Central Valley, and actually all of Mexico, is a very volcanic land. And the molcajete is not the only way to make a sauce. You could put all of this in a blender and not blend it through, sort of like leave chunks of it. But the molcajete allows for a more irregular sauce, which I find more appealing. And I just want to show you I want to teach you how to use a molcajete. You know, volcanic rocks are very much part of our Mexican cooking tradition because I was telling you about how masa is ground between two volcanic rocks with a very simple motor. That's a molino, or a masa grinder. But originally, you use something called a metate. And a metate is a volcanic piece of rock that is shaped into sort of a slate. And with that, you mash the corn, you grind the spices for the mole. Mole originally, traditionally, in Oaxaca, Oaxacan traditional mole is made on a metate. So metate, molcajete, again, you can use now grinders, motors, electricity is around, and you don't need to slave. This is much more of a workout. But I just want to teach it to you because you don't see it every time. Okay, here we go. These are almost fully cooked. Charring things, turns out, is also quite a healthy thing for one's diet. I think an excessive char, especially in meats, it has turned out to be really not good for your body and your health. And there's a lot of research around that. But vegetables, charred vegetables and charred tortilla, for example, are really helpful for the digestion of food and fat in your body. Okay, I think this is charred enough. I want to make sure the tomatoes are fully cooked because that's the only way I'm going to be able to mash them. And I want to put everything in here. I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to let it sit for a minute while I start mashing. I'm going to show you. Now, here we go. The onions are particularly difficult because they're very slippery. That's why I wanted to cut them smaller. I want to make sure the garlic is all very well ground, just because I don't want big pieces of garlic in the salsa. So I want to make sure I get those before we get the rest of the ingredients. This is a very, very intense workout because we're not even halfway through it and I already feel my arm is stronger. Something that you might want to take out as you make your salsa is when the tomatoes are cooked, the skin comes out really easily. I like to take out a little bit of the tomato skin, so it's better to have just the pulp. Everybody has their techniques. The way I use a molcajete is I bring things toward me, and that's where I mash. The real mashing happens when the two stones touch each other. And I don't want to mash more than the necessary, but this is the beginning, and as I said, I want to do sort of a little garlic paste. And this is a garlic with 1 tomatillo and most of the onion. And now I'm ready to put in the rest of the ingredients. I definitely recommend that you grind the garlic first. If you want your sauce to be chunky in terms of the garlic in it, then go ahead and don't mash the garlic. It's very personal. I feel sauces are very personal. I am teaching you what I like to make. Okay, you see, so here directly, this is a tomato skin. I'm just getting rid of it. So, I'm gonna put salt. For this amount of salsa, I'm gonna put 1 teaspoon of salt to begin with. This is the easiest part of the mashing. The tomatillos and the tomatoes are really soft, so you just basically have to blend them together. Oh my goodness, this smells so good. Okay, the tomatillos, as you saw, were very small. I like small tomatillos. I believe small tomatillos are much more intense in flavor and not bitter, and that's an important thing. So I want tomatillos in general to be the small, really tasty, acidic type. Don't think I'm forgetting the chiles in that pot. They're soaking there. I'm again taking out skins of tomato that are too large, and you want a little bit of the roughage. Look at this, okay. I put 1 teaspoon of salt, and I'm going to now take these soaking chiles and put them in there. I'm gonna put them on one side so I can make sure that I get to all the pieces of them and that I actually grind them. These chiles that I soaked are really hydrated and very soft. So you can take out the pulp from inside, and the only thing that is gonna be left to grind or to molcajetear, which is a verb in Mexico, like a salsa molcajeteada. So it's not only the word molcajete or the noun, but it's a verb. I'm gonna molcajetear the skin. I'm gonna molcajetear all of it, but the skin is what I wanna disintegrate. I have the chiles on this end, the dried chiles, and I'm just mixing them up with the rest of the ingredients around them, and I am making sure that the skins are indeed being mushed. So now I'm gonna mix it up, and now I'm gonna add the fresh cilantro. I want basically the leaves, and I don't want the thick parts of the cilantro. It's great cilantro, fragrant, delicious. I can't think of the Mexican diet without cilantro. I find it fascinating that it isn't even an indigenous plant, but it's very much a part of our diet. I'm not gonna press it. I just wanna integrate it to the sauce. So I wanna mix it. I'm using this in a very light way to just mix it around. And it just gives the sauce a freshness that will balance it out. Okay, I think we're ready. I wanna try this. Let me see, I'm gonna clean out the edges. I was a little bit messy. It's very difficult to not be messy with a molcajete. And I was lucky I didn't get a tomato flying into my apron. Usually I would recommend this sauce for like a taco of meat. Or you could use it in a quesadilla with an intense cheese, not with a mild cheese, because otherwise it will take over everything. Because this is an intense sauce. Oh my goodness, it's so good. Now we're ready to serve it. You don't need to wait for the sauce to chill. It's not hot anymore. You can very easily eat it. I would recommend serving it right away, but you can certainly keep it. It keeps well. Everything in here is cooked except for the cilantro. Actually, you know what? I might, since there are a few stems in there, I might grind it a little bit just to make sure that I'm not picking through the sauce. You can refrigerate the sauce and it will keep for at least 3-4 days, fine. If you can resist not eating it before, because it's actually, we didn't make a quantity that was large enough to last very much. If you have a meal of, say, 6 people, you will most likely finish this sauce in 1 meal. And I like to make sauces fresh. I mean, I like to have sauces in my fridge so that you have them there and you can add them to anything that you eat. But this salsa is ready to be eaten, ready to be served. Usually I associate it with tacos, but you can put it on anything, even fish or certain vegetables cooked simply. Just liven up with this sauce. So now you know how to make this salsa brava, the salsa verde cruda, and the charred red salsa. Those are 3 basic ways in which to make salsa, and feel free to experiment. Use other ingredients. Char other vegetables and put it into your charred salsa. Don't use little gems. Use another fresh lettuce or green leaf to put into your raw salsa. Anything that you find appealing. You sort of have 3 basic recipes, systems, or ways, paths to follow. Period. So 1998, the scene of restaurants in Mexico City was so different from what it is now. Japanese food was popular. Asian fusion was having a big moment. And at the beginning of Contramar was not as popular as it now is. We had chunks of time to create dishes. And one of the cheapest fish we could find was tuna. Believe it or not, nobody in Mexico 20 years ago wanted to eat tuna. People wanted white fish. People wanted things that were reminiscent of snapper or of merluza. I don't know how you say merluza in English. And tuna was tuna has always been along the coast of Mexico, in the Gulf, on the Pacific. It was so accessible that we thought we need to do something with this fish. So we had a tuna fillet, and we copied what many restaurants were doing abroad, which is sort of a raw center tuna fillet, seared tuna, and in an Asian-y sauce. And then we took it further in our fusion with Mexican food. We had tacos, we had the fresh-made tortillas on the comal in the restaurant. We would then fry the tortillas and have tostadas. So we have octopus tostada, shrimp tostada, and we came up with the tuna tostada. So the tuna tostada is now, I'm very proud to say, it is a dish that is on so many menus of Mexican food in Mexico and abroad. I want to think of the tuna tostada as sort of a parallel with a Caesar salad. Nobody knows where it's from. Everybody loves it. And it's just very widely spread and popular. Contramar was the first restaurant to serve the tuna tostada, I'm very proud to say. And the way we did it is putting together, our different cooking traditions. So the Mexican tostada, the chipotle chile, which we mixed into a mayonnaise that we usually make at home. It's very easy to make it. I'll give you the recipe. And you should not be scared of making any mayonnaise because it's just having a good blender. And we've seen for many recipes here that the trick is having a good blender. I am gonna make a spicy chipotle mayonnaise. And I'm literally gonna put the pureed chipotle and mix it with the mayonnaise that's already been made. I would prompt you to make your own mayonnaise because it really is very easy. However, if you wanna buy mayonnaise, you can find so many great organic types of mayonnaise. And the chipotles are very easily found in different stores or online. Chipotles are dried and then rehydrated and cooked jalapeno chiles. So it's sort of like the third stage of a jalapeno chile. And they're usually smoked and they're preserved with a little bit of piloncillo. It's a simple recipe, you can also do that. But usually, even we use canned chipotles because it's very, very easy to find good ones. And this is a mayonnaise that is a little bit spicy, but not overly spicy. Chipotle is a very easy chile. The smokiness and the spice balance really well, and it's a widely appreciated chile. This is what we will spread on the tostada. So our Mexican part is the tostada, the chipotle in the mayonnaise, and then here comes my Italian influence. So, leeks. Leeks are a vegetable that you find in Mexico. It's an allium. So we came up with fried leeks, and we just, the trick to frying the leeks is to have thinly sliced leeks and then to separate all the rings. I'm gonna put them here for the time being, but a really easy way to separate them is to put them in cold water and to sort of like get your hands in there and separate them. So you wanna make slices of leeks that aren't, this is the thinnest you could go, and this would be the thickest you should go. These are leeks that have been sliced and separated, and they're ready to be fried. And the fried leek is really the secret of this dish. We usually go until like this part, because you wanna make sure that the green is not fried because it can become bitter easily. So you chop all of your white leek in thin rounds, and you separate them in water, in cold water, and then you dry them out and you get this. And we also have another part, which is the Asian fusion part of our tostada. And this is that we make a marinade with soy sauce. Now we sometimes use tamari as well, just to make it gluten-free, as it is a very common need in our time. So we do orange juice, and I'm gonna squeeze these just here with my hands. In general, at the restaurant, we have liters of these oranges being squeezed daily. And they usually come from the state of Veracruz, but we have very good citruses in Mexico. You might use any orange that is good for juicy. And depending on how sweet it is, you will add a little bit of lime juice. And for the saltiness, you're gonna add the soy sauce or the tamari sauce, depending on whether you need your tostada to be gluten-free. I know that the widespread orange in Mexico is Valencia, but this looks very different from the Valencia oranges that you find in California. So, naranja criolla, as they always call everything in Mexico. When we don't know what it is, we always say, frijol criollo, naranja criolla, jitomate criollo. It is true. It is like an alternative to saying it's native. But it comes actually from the colonial period. Being criollo was being Spanish, but born in the Americas. We just squeezed 2 oranges into this bowl. I want to take out the seeds. In general, when you have an orange squeezer, you generally don't get the seeds. Okay, I'm gonna put equal parts of orange juice and soy sauce. And then I'm going to adjust for acidity with the limes. So I'm gonna try it again with my method. Okay, we need it to be more acidic. So I'm gonna squeeze half a lime. Between the sweetness of the orange and the saltiness of the soy sauce, you're lacking a little bit of acidity. Depending on the season, oranges can be more acidic. That's why I say you need to adjust. You need to sort of make sure that it is a little bit sweet, needs to be a little bit salty, and a little bit acidic. Not too much. These three things need to balance out. The spice you will get later from the chipotle. It should be ready. And now it's perfect. Okay, so we have our marinade ready for the tuna. We have our chipotle mayonnaise ready to be put over the corn tostada. And we have our leeks ready to be fried. So now we're gonna marinate the tuna. So here we have the really fresh, beautiful tuna loin, which we're gonna slice in just a minute. I am going to fry our tortillas, which I have here, and my oil is ready. It's a little bit higher than 350, so I'm gonna take advantage and fry the tostadas, which can take a little bit more heat. There they go. I wanted to fry these immediately because the oil was at the right temperature, and I want the oil to go a little bit lower before I fry the leeks. What I'm doing is frying this soft tortilla that is, that was made yesterday and has been air dried, and I'm turning it into a tostada, which is the equivalent of what you might know as a taco shell, but it's flattened. And then it's a perfect receptacle for ceviches, for fresh fish preparations, sort of on the go. It's a way of preserving tortillas in climates where it's difficult to preserve soft tortillas. If your oil is ready and it's at 350, 370, the tortillas will be fried in a minute and a half. They really do have to be firm. And it all has to do with the quality of the tortilla. These are very thin tortillas. If you have thicker tortillas, you will need a little bit more time. But these are really thin tortillas. And you hear how it's like a little cardboard? You can find these. They're widely available in the US markets. As long as the corn is good and it tastes well and it has a good crunch and a good bite for what you're gonna prepare, I would encourage you to try different options. I am just making my own because I wanna make sure that they're delicious, and I know that this will be delicious. So now we're gonna go on to filleting our fresh and delicious loin of tuna. As I was telling you a little bit before, when we opened Contramar in the late 90s, tuna was widely available in Mexico. But tuna historically has been caught in a really problematic way because it's been overfished, and it's also fished in huge boats that bring out many other species from the ocean that we do not need to fish. Dolphins, turtles, animals that nobody's gonna eat. And this is called bycatch. But fortunately, all these programs have been put in place, and there's a lot of awareness in terms of how we are fishing tuna nowadays. There are some periods of the year in which you're not supposed to fish tuna. There are periods of the year in which you're supposed to fish tuna from one region and not another. And all of these issues have become important to me, and more so with time, and more so with the fact that tuna became such a popular dish at Contramar. And Contramar has really become a role model for so many restaurants. There are so many restaurants that now sell seafood dishes that 20 years ago didn't exist. Now every Mexican restaurant everywhere in the world has a ceviche, a tostada, an aguachile, a tiradito. And I think we ought to be extremely responsible. And for example, at Cala, our restaurant in San Francisco, we decided that we were not gonna make a tuna tostada, as popular as that might have been. So we decided to go for a tostada with trout, and it is farm trout. And I believe it's important to consider farm fish, as long as it's well-fed, it's not full of antibiotics. I really think we ought to be very mindful of the fish we consume. So I'm gonna marinate this in thin slices. This is sashimi grade tuna, and I'm gonna just put it in the marinade of orange lime soy sauce that I recently made. The cut should be like 3 millimeters wide. If you go to a fancy Japanese place, this is like medium sashimi. And this is a perfect tuna loin. This has no nerves. Like, this is as clean as you can get. This is really high quality. Okay, I believe we have enough for our 2 tostadas here. We're gonna let this marinate for a little bit while we go ahead and prepare our leeks. We have our tostadas ready to go. They have cooled. And now we're gonna switch. Perfect. It's very important to be very mindful of the temperature of the oil when frying the leeks because they burn easily. And if they burn, they become bitter and you don't want that. And you wanna do it a little bit at a time because if you put too many inside at the same time, inside the oil, they will stick together. Okay. So you want them to brown, but you do not want them to be more than golden. They're gonna be ready as soon as they start browning. You need to make sure that you separate them or that you keep them from sticking to each other. And now they're ready to be taken out. They just go in seconds. And they come out and they're very soft. But as soon as they start drying out, they become crisp. And that's what you want. You want the combination of the crispiness of the tostada at the bottom and then the leeks at the top. Okay, so we're ready. We have our mayonnaise here, our chipotle mayonnaise, and we're gonna put this on the very crisp fried tostada. I put a little bit of it. I want every bite of the tostada to have a little bit of this spiciness and smokiness of the chipotle. And this has really been a dish we've done for so many years, and it is exactly the same as the first one we made, and we don't change anything because it is so delicious. There is no need to change absolutely anything. Okay, here is our marinated tuna, and it really is a perfect bite. So we have our tuna sashimi grade, delicious tuna. I think that's enough. So if you have too much tuna, you can't eat it well. You also want to be careful. Same as with the taco and a tostada, you don't want it to be overflowing because otherwise you can't even bite into it. So once you have this, I'm going to put the fried leeks over it. And then I am going to put a slice of perfectly ripe and creamy avocado. This is a really ripe avocado. It's soft to the touch. Sort of it yields when you get in there. And what you do is latch onto the seed, turn it, twist it, and then in general in the restaurant what we do, because you need a lot of these at the same time, is you take them out with a spoon and you have them outside sliced. But what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna slice it in pieces which are easier to handle. And then I'm just gonna make a slice, 2 slices, and I am gonna take it out, put the slice of the avocado on the tostada, and there you go. You have your 2 perfect tostadas. Put a little bit of lime, and there you have it. This dish is a really perfect dish. It's crispy, it's hearty, it's smoky because of the chipotle, it's a little bit spicy, it's acidic, it has that sweetness that the orange and the soy sauce provide, and it's salty, it's a total bite of umami. What we're gonna make now is a fried quesadilla, deep-fried quesadilla. It's a very typical Mexico City street food or sort of informal appetizer. But it's part of what you would call in Mexico antojitos. Antojitos, literally translated, are little cravings. It's a diminutive for cravings. Usually it's very tasty, many times fried, always savory. Food that can be used for snacking, for appetizers, for bar food, sort of as a little tentempié, which is called, a tentempié is something to snack on before you have a proper meal. But fried quesadillas are made with different fillings in different parts of the country. And in Mexico City, it is very much a street food. People have their stand, they have a big pot of oil. We have our oil here, it's heating up. And in general, when I say quesadilla, you think of a flour tortilla with melted cheese. And yes, quesadilla comes from queso, cheese. The word comes from something filled with cheese. However, in Mexico City, quesadilla is a word that we use for anything, even if it doesn't have cheese, sort of inside a tortilla. And it's any folded tortilla. In Mexico City, we mostly have corn tortillas. I'm going to show you a quesadilla that does not include cheese. And I'm going to show you how to make a very delicious and special filling with a version of corn. We are going to use our masa to make a tortilla, and we're going to put a filling inside, and we're going to deep fry it. You will see how that is made in a little bit. But the main ingredient in our filling is going to be huitlacoche. This is a fungus. But it's a delicacy. It's considered the Mexican truffle. Another very popular filling for quesadillas, which don't include cheese, is our all different mushrooms. And huitlacoche is a type of a mushroom, but it's particular of the corn. And it's a kernel that is defective, but it's a defect that we look for because the taste is incredible. It has an earthy, very mild flavor. It's very precious to have huitlacoche. And it's something that we look forward to having. It's sort of like the truffle period in Europe. It's been for centuries something that in Mexican cuisine has been really appreciated. So I'm gonna cut this off. Some varietals are more prone to getting this fungus than others. I have seen huitlacoche in California. I don't know how common it is in other parts of the United States. You can find it canned. And the one that you find canned usually has already been prepared in a similar way to what we're gonna do with it. I'm gonna leave the cob there. So we're gonna start off by putting a little bit of grapeseed oil. I like grapeseed oil just because it has a higher smoke point. But you could use olive oil. The thing is that you really have to make sure it doesn't burn, because if it burns, you get this bitterness. And especially with huitlacoche, which is so delicate, you do not want flavors that interfere with the delicacy of the huitlacoche. So I'm gonna start off by putting some onion. And for this amount of huitlacoche, I want about 3 spoons of onion. This is a really easy dish. First of all, because it's just a very simple preparation, because you want to highlight the delicacy of the huitlacoche. But it's also a very convenient dish because it's vegan, it's vegetarian, of course, and it's, it doesn't have any cheese, it doesn't have any animal protein. I'm just using the grapeseed oil, onion. I'm gonna put a little bit of garlic and chile serrano without the seeds. And I want to make sure that the garlic doesn't turn bitter, so I'm doing the onion first. That's something that I always recommend doing. I'm gonna lower the heat. You don't wanna burn this. We're just gonna let it sweat for a little bit. And I'm gonna make sure that we have half a teaspoon of garlic. I'm gonna put 1 teaspoon of serrano chiles, very finely diced. Garlic smells so good. The garlic is one of my favorite smells in food. And what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna make sure that we don't get the pan ever to burn anything. You don't want to allow it to ever burn because burnt garlic is really bitter and you don't want that, especially not in the huitlacoche. You want it to be really delicate. And that's why I also took out the seeds from the serrano chile that I minced. If you don't have access to huitlacoche, I would suggest using fresh mushrooms, fresh fungus, and there are so many different varietals. Some canned huitlacoche can be good, and depending on who canned it or who made it, you could also find vacuum-packed huitlacoche. You know, try it, taste it. You see how it's becoming darker now that we're cooking it? And it's just, this is just a quality of huitlacoche. It turns darker, and some huitlacoche is darker to begin with. I was actually surprised at how white this huitlacoche in particular is. Now I'm smelling not only the serrano pepper and the garlic and the onion, but I'm smelling the earthiness of the huitlacoche. I want to keep it constantly moving because I do not want it to burn. I also have lowered the heat to the lowest possible. I'm going to put a little bit more oil just to make sure that it doesn't stick to the pan. And I mean, really, huitlacoche is one of the things that I always wonder when people started eating it. Somebody very brave must have been the first to eat huitlacoche because it doesn't look that attractive. But it is very common. And some patches of land are more prone to creating huitlacoche than others. There's a whole theory. They've tried to grow it artificially or to, sort of infect the corn with whatever makes this fungus grow, but it doesn't. The best one is the one that happens on its own. Okay, here we are. It is important to add a little bit of oil if you see it's drying out, because again, you do not want anything to be burning. A little bit of browning is fine, but not more than that. This is cooking beautifully. It smells delicious. The garlic, the onion. I'm gonna put now the salt. I never wanna put salt on vegetables that have water in them because it just takes all the liquid out. But now I'm gonna finish cooking it with the epazote, which is a traditional herb that we use for fungi? Yeah, with mushrooms in general. And huitlacoche is considered, like, as I said, like the king of Mexican mushrooms. So this is our epazote, very, very, very finely cut. And epazote is, actually, I've seen it growing on the streets in New York, in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. It's a weed. It really is a weed. It's very widely used in Mexican food. It's always sort of part of the quesadilla filling with the mushrooms, or in mushroom soup. You use it for stocks. You use it for cooking fish even. So I'm gonna let it just sweat for a little bit, just so that it finishes cooking while I prepare my tortillas for the quesadillas. The oil is almost there, so I am going to turn this off and let it finish cooking without the fire. And we're gonna set up for the making of our quesadillas. So now we're ready to make our tortillas. Our huitlacoche is finished. It looks dark, and I think it's gonna be really delicious. I am gonna start pressing tortillas. This is just technically different than making a quesadilla with a tortilla that has already been cooked. So we have our little masa balls. It's the same masa that we used earlier for our tortillas. And I'm just gonna press it here. The only interesting thing about this preparation is that you want to make it here. While you have one side of the plastic, you put the filling, and you have to make sure you don't put too much, because otherwise it will break. So I'm not gonna put more than, it's like 2 scarce spoonfuls. And then what we do is we make a little type of empanada, you don't want air to be left inside. So you want to make sure you close it so that each end sticks to itself or to the other end. And you kind of seal it. It's like a, filled pasta or Argentine empanada. I just feel that if you have dough, you want to make more things with it. People want to eat the same thing, and that's sort of a condition of humans. But also you want to innovate so that you don't get bored. And that's sort of life, right? You want to keep on, and I guess food, that's cooking, right? You're following tradition on one hand, but then on the other hand, you're innovating and finding new things to make along the way. So here we are making our second little fried quesadilla preparation. You don't want it to make it very thin, because if you make them very thin, then you risk breaking them with the filling. Again, usually you choose a filling that is soft. Like, you're making ravioli and you're filling it up with something that won't break the dough, right? The delicate dough. So again, like 2 scarce spoonfuls. You don't want to fill it up too much, because you always want to leave that space for the dough to meet the other end. And you have to be very careful to not break it. And you want to make sure that your filling stays in the middle and that you're taking the air out before you're pressing it together, so that when you cook it, you don't have any cracks in the masa. So here we have our second. I'm going to just make 3 so that we have a nice set again of 3 little quesadillas or queso-less quesadillas, which I really find funny. And these you can fill with anything. I love ricotta-filled deep-fried quesadillas. I love chicken tinga deep-fried quesadillas. I always call them quesadillas doradas, because quesadillas fritas doesn't sound that attractive. So maybe we should not say deep-fried quesadillas. It should just be quesadillas doradas, Mexico City style. Quesadillas doradas means golden brown quesadillas. Sort of like tanned. On the beachside palapas, you have pescadillas, which are made with fish. And it's a great way to use fish that isn't that attractive or is like darker meat. I do serve them at my restaurant, and we have quesadillas doradas de pescado, and we have quesadillas doradas de requesón, and we make different quesadillas doradas depending on what we have. And what's in season. And I like the vegetarian type. As I said before, I love that this is not only a vegetarian, but a vegan dish. Okay, so our oil is a little under 350, and we want it at 350, which is the ideal temperature to fry. I'm gonna put the heat up just a tiny bit. We can make sure we have the right temperature. It's also gonna go down. The temperature is gonna go down as soon as we put the quesadilla inside. You have to be very careful not to burn yourself. So you see how this cracked? I'm not gonna put that one in. You can repair it later, but for now I'm not gonna put it in. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take some masa. I do not want these to stick together, and they're sticking. Here they go. Okay. Want them to separate. And again, the name of this dish is very indicative of what you want. You want them to be golden brown. You don't want them to be burnt. You don't want them to be overcooked. The filling is already cooked. You don't need to fill, you just need to heat it up. And you need to make sure that the masa is golden and cooked enough. A way of avoiding this is to really make sure that your masa is very moist. This has been sitting out here for a little bit, so it got drier than I wanted. And then at the end, I wasn't being careful about taking the air out. So I'm gonna patch it up now. I'm gonna make a little tortilla here, just so I have enough dough. I'm gonna make it very thin. And I'm gonna take a little bit of it. I cut this. This is an experiment. I don't know if this will, yeah, thin enough that you can repair it. I don't want to put too much. This is not as attractive, but certainly it helps you not to waste it. Okay, and this, I made it very, very thin. Okay, I'm gonna see how these are doing. They can probably cook a little bit more. I'm gonna raise the fire. These are beautiful. They're gonna be delicious. So this is an exaggeration. I would never serve this at any of my restaurants. I would probably serve it at home for my son or for people that I'm very comfortable and that I don't want to impress. But I hate wasting food. This is one of the things that I inherited from my mother's side of the family. My mother was born during the war in Italy, and we definitely do not waste food. There's a whole history of not wasting food that people have made fun of us forever about. Because in Mexico, if you're well off, you are allowed to waste a little bit of food. There's such abundance of food in general. But I don't go by wasting food. So this is a repaired quesadilla, and it's on the verge of not being repairable. So I'm gonna put it fast in here, and we'll see what happens. So these could do a little bit more browning. So I'm gonna leave them for a tiny bit more. I don't want them to go overboard, but they're still not brown enough. It's fine. And you want them to be crispy. You want them to be really crispy when you bite into them. And you're supposed to eat these fresh. And again, depending on what filling you have, they usually come served with cream, sauce, even some shredded cabbage sometimes, or shredded lettuce. There are all sorts of ways of serving quesadillas doradas. I'm gonna put them here so that the paper absorbs some of the oil. If you wanted to add cheese to these, you could have grated cheese on the top. So either queso fresco, sort of crumbled, or dry, sort of cotija type. Look, this is not doing bad at all. And I'm repairing a little, it's gonna be a little broken quesadilla. So you want enough oil that you're not suffering with the quesadilla not being like fully covered. Here, this is maybe more than I need for 3 quesadillas. But if you were making, 20, 25 quesadillas, this would be the right amount of oil to go through the whole process and not end up needing to add oil at the end. It's very important that you have your oil up to 350 degrees. It always cools down when you put in your quesadilla, your little bundle of masa. It always goes down. So keep it at a medium to high temperature. And if you have a thermometer such as this one, which is very easy to find, you can be checking on the temperature not going down. And it's important because then you will have a uniformly cooked quesadilla. Look at here we go with this little one. And depending on how brown your quesadillas are, I would say cook them for about 5 to 7 minutes. See, here's our little repaired one. It's not bad. And I would just serve, for example, these. And maybe like even more. Put them like this. You can put them one over the other. You can make a big platter with more of them. I want to serve these with this salsa, it has avocado, which I think is a really nice complement to the huitlacoche. It's nice and subtle, but it also adds this freshness to a very earthy tasting filling. And I think that, it's nice to have a sauce that you can dip the quesadilla into. But I'm gonna show you the filling inside. Look at this cooked, delicious huitlacoche quesadilla. I'm gonna put the sauce in there and then bite into it. I hope not to burn my mouth. These are very mild quesadillas. It's a very good combination. Avocado, huitlacoche, fried masa. Fried masa is one of my favorite things. But I guess fried dough is a favorite of every culture. So this is just one more example of how you use masa in very many different ways. Masa is sort of a blank canvas that you start off with, and then you add all these other ingredients, and it just adds on to the complexity. And again, you have a tortilla that you serve with mole, for example, which is one of the most sophisticated Mexican dishes. And then you also have a tortilla that you just eat with a little bit of salt and a slice of avocado. So just, masa is really the beginning of every Mexican traditional dish. I find that it's just the center of everything that we eat in Mexico. So I really encourage you to experiment with using masa in its different ways. Now I'm gonna teach you how to make an aguachile. Aguachile has become a very popular way of cooking raw seafood or of preparing raw seafood. Aguachiles are traditional of the Pacific coast of Mexico, the northern Pacific coast. And aguachile is basically a combination of agua and chile, water and chile, and the liquid, the water content, is lime and fish or seashell fume. It's a really easy way to prepare seafood in a very, palate exciting way. We have some shrimp here that we will open up, and I'm gonna start by taking off the head because you want just the clean meat. I want the raw meat of the shrimp, and I'm gonna cook that in a lime juice and that I'm gonna prepare with a few herbs and spices. I wanna devein the shrimp. Shrimp are very symmetrical. So it's easy to cut along the back of it, and you see that vein. It's very clearly defined there, and I just take the beginning of it with my knife. I just wanna make sure that it's sort of clean of all the insides, and you only have your shrimp meat. And now I'm gonna cut it, I'm gonna butterfly it. You can butterfly it and leave it, literally butterfly it like this, or you can cut through all the way. And I use a small knife because a large knife would be very difficult to use in this. You wanna have precision over what you're doing with the shrimp. I always like to salt things so that it sort of cures them before you add the acidity, and it helps it keep more of the flavor. So I'm gonna mix it up. I'm gonna salt it thoroughly and mix it a little bit, and I'm gonna add the lime juice. It's very important that you prepare the shrimp first thing, and as soon as your shrimp is ready to go and clean, that you add the lime juice so that this starts curing. I think of this as a cooking method, and it is not a cooking method, it is a curing method. So I just wanna make sure that the lime gets into every bit of the fish. Sometimes it can stick to each other. So I just wanna make sure the lime juice with the salt is really marinating it all. I'm gonna add a little bit more lime juice, and then I'm gonna let it sit. So I am gonna really fast pickle onion. These are onions that have been very finely sliced. These are purple onions that give it just a really nice touch. They're gonna turn really bright pink, and they're very, very, very finely julienne, which is just very finely sliced lengthwise. And I am going to add a little bit of salt to them, just so everything has a little bit of flavor. And I'm going to add the same lime juice that I put on the shrimp. I just want these to marinate while I make my aguachile mix. Okay, you see immediately, as soon as the lime touches the onions, the juice turns really pink. This is a very fast transformation. This is exactly how you would make the pickled red onions that you find in many restaurants, in many Southeastern specialty restaurants in Yucatan and Tabasco. They, sometimes they're diced, sometimes they're cut lengthways like this, but they always have either habanero or amachito or another very spicy chile, salt, and many times pepper or oregano. So it just depends on where you're at. I'm gonna let it sit there with the lime and the salt, and I'm gonna prepare the cucumber. I don't know if this is a myth or not. I think it is a myth, but I always do this to cucumber edges because they say they take the bitterness out. And so I'm gonna use the skin of this cucumber. This is a clean cucumber, and I'm gonna just cut rounds of it. And they don't need to be extremely thin. They just need to be sort of nice and even. And I like using Japanese cucumber because it has a nice edge, and you can eat the skin. So aguachiles, I think, have become very popular because our palates are excited by acidity. And lime, the acidity from lime is really particular. We do have a lot of citrus in Mexico in general, and it's an easy way of giving food a very special touch. I really believe in the pleasure of eating the freshest seafood, and adding lime to it, curing seafood in lime and salt and other spices is a great way of celebrating freshness in what you're eating. So I am gonna now show you how to make the aguachile itself. We're gonna let these cucumbers rest here. We're gonna add our fish fume, which is basically a fish broth that I make with the bones of fish and with the heads of shrimp and with sort of the tasty parts of the fish that I'm not gonna use for dishes. It's very easy to make this at home. You can even take the heads out of the shrimp ahead of time, put them in water with a little bit of garlic and onion, and then you have your fume. You strain it, you have your fume. If it's not as clear as this, because the shrimp one might be pink or more brownish, it's fine. It's important that it's cold. You are gonna get the color from the parsley and the cilantro leaves, which you will see in a minute. So I have parsley and cilantro here combined. I use the parsley both for the peppery flavor, but mostly for the intense green. I'm gonna put a chile serrano, halved, just so it grinds well. And for flavor, I'm gonna add the remainder of the lime juice. I'm gonna squeeze some more limes into it, just because I don't want it to be lacking acidity. And I am gonna also put the remainder of the juice that the shrimp have been curing in. The real challenge when you're making an aguachile is to have everything very well seasoned. The balance, again, it's the balance between the salt and the acidity. Here we've marinated our seafood, shrimp in this case, and it's cured enough that you can eat it. You're not gonna get a bite of completely raw shrimp. I usually let it sit for about 5 minutes. I think this is what we've done now. You don't need more than that. And it is very important to have the juice of the lime come out very white. The meat of the shrimp renders the whiteness, which is called, I don't know, in Peru they call it leche de tigre, which is, it's this like milky water. This is juice that has salt and the flavor of the shrimp. And I'm gonna put it in our mixture here. because it's gonna make it more flavorful. And I think the two basic things about aguachile is, first of all, that you use fresh things, fresh ingredients, beginning with your protein. But secondly, that you really season everything every time as carefully as possible. I urge you to taste things. This is a dish that can take a lot of salt, especially because the shrimp is sweet and also because of the level of acidity. And then you're also gonna have, you also have the acidic onions that you're gonna put over it. And you have the cucumber, which is very bland, to give it a little crunch and also a balance out of the whole sort of party of flavors. So I urge you to marinate everything, to taste everything. I'm gonna blend this for a little bit, just enough that it mixes. I don't want to over-mix it because I don't want it to get hot, but I do want to make sure that all the parsley and cilantro leaves are chopped very, very finely. And now I'm gonna taste it for salt, and we'll report back. Okay. I'm tasting it here because it's sort of it's a cleaner way to not need to clean the spoon every time you dip it into food that is gonna go into everybody else's mouth, not only mine. So I like to do it this way. I know that this part of my hand is not gonna, it's a very home cooked trick that I've had to not use in the restaurants. But as I'm showing you how to make things at home, I think it's a good way of putting food there that you can taste, and it's a part of your hand that won't necessarily touch what you're gonna serve others. It's so good, it's so spicy. The fresh serrano has all the seeds there. It's super spicy, I love it. I like using a white plate for aguachile because it's so colorful. I wanna put the shrimp in such a way that it's just laying on the dish. I wanna put the skin down just so that more flavor goes into the inside of the shrimp because it's a part that is yet open. The skin will prevent the juices from absorbing as much. So, did you notice how the meat of how the shrimp was very transparent-y? It was like a gray, transparent gray, and now it's white. So this is why I always think of aguachile or ceviche or lime as cooking, because it actually feels cooked. The meat feels cooked, even though, again, it's a wrong word to use because it is never cooked. So here we are, and I'm gonna add a little bit of salt to this. I'm gonna take it with my fingers because I want to make sure it's all very, very, very flavorful. And salt, as you know, makes things be more exciting. So I am gonna use this green juice. This is your aguachile. It's a very spicy serrano, parsley, cilantro-y liquid. And I am gonna top it with a few of the cucumber rounds that I have here. You can put more, less, however, it adds a nice crunch. I wanna put enough so that you get one in each bite, but you don't need to exaggerate. And then I am going to put a few of our pink onions now, because they're not purple anymore. And I just wanna distribute a little bit of that extra acidity and crunch and clean flavor that the onion offers. And even if you have marinated the onions, they do add a really nice crunch to the whole thing. Okay, I think it looks nice enough. Then comes a really interesting part. This has all been salted independently, so when it comes together, you can be sure it's gonna be good. And then I'm gonna add the really important ingredient, which is chiltepin. Chiltepin is a very small, very, very small chile from Sonora, the northwest of Mexico. And it's the chile that is typically used with aguachile as well as serrano. Some aguachiles don't have serrano, they only have chiltepin. This is ground chiltepin. So it is very, very, very fine, but it is very, very, very spicy. And this is just what we finish off our aguachile with. And we eat it typically with deep fried tortillas, which are called totopos. And here we are. This is our aguachile dish. I like to add a little bit of olive oil just at the end as a finishing touch because I think it makes the green look nicer, or it gives it a little bit more ease in the mouth. So as you see, this is a dish with very few ingredients. So the importance of the integrity in each of the ingredients is crucial. I would really suggest that you never have seafood, you never eat seafood that isn't, well-sourced, fresh, trustworthy, that you use the freshest cucumber, and that you have really good limes to squeeze, because that's the only thing you're putting into this dish. So make sure they're all top-notch. So now I'm going to teach you how to make one of the super basic Mexican dishes, which is a tamal. And in this case, I'm going to make a sweet tamal. Tamales are basically masa, corn masa, that you prepare in different ways. You add fat, lard usually. You add sugar or salt or sauce or chicken broth or pork broth. There are so many ways to make tamales. And usually you have a filling for a tamal, and then you either with a corn husk or with a banana leaf, you wrap it up, and there are many, many different tamales throughout Mexico. And a tamal is a meal in itself. It's a little wrapped meal that you can have at a party. You don't need dishes to eat it because you have the husk or the banana leaf to eat it on. And I am gonna teach you one of my favorite tamales, which is a guava tamal. This is the guava. Guavas are a very fragrant, very typical fruit of the Mexican winter. You use it in tamales, in atole, in different preparations because it's fragrant. It's a fruit that is sometimes difficult to eat because of all the seeds inside, but here I'm gonna show you a trick for eating them. And you have yellow guavas, and then you also have these beautiful pink guavas that are really a party of color in here. And they both have the seeds, but you see the difference between these two. And we're gonna combine these two in our tamales just for the sake of showing you that you could use either, both. Here we go. And it's sweetened with piloncillo, which is cane sugar. And I'm gonna add canela, and I'm gonna put this in our fire to begin with. I want to start this fire with a little bit of water. I want this at high heat, and then when it starts boiling, we will lower it. I am going to start that off as I cut my guavas. Guavas are best eaten when you pick them from a tree. Usually guavas are sold by small vendors in markets. They're not a large crop fruit of Mexico. I am going to mix this piloncillo. Now it's about to boil, so I'm just gonna lower it so that it doesn't boil on me while I am putting the guava insides. I'm scooping out all the part that has the seeds, and I'm leaving the hard sort of shell. It isn't very hard, so you have to be very careful with a spoon because we're gonna use the skin for texture in the tamal. We're gonna make a syrup with this, with the inside of the guava, with both the pink and the yellow guavas. There are so many different types of tamales depending on what part of Mexico you're in. The guava tamales are for sure a seasonal tamal, and it's wintry, but you can substitute guavas for apples, pineapple, any fruit that you might have, for sure berries, for sure strawberries. There are so many easy fruits to put in a tamal. Okay, so here we're making a guava compote with the insides of the guava. We're gonna make sure that the seeds don't interfere in our tamal because the seeds of the guava can be uncomfortable to eat. So I am making this compote here with the piloncillo and the cinnamon. Cinnamon is a very Mexican spice to use, especially with sweets. And piloncillo is cane syrup in a raw form. Usually they put the syrup into molds that look like this, and then you have, when it dries out, you have these sort of more manageable sized pieces of chunks of piloncillo. And what I did is I grated it, and that's what I put into the syrup. Now I'm cooking my guavas in the syrup, so they're gonna be nice and sweet, and they're gonna be, the fragrance is gonna come out, and I also have the canela sticks in here. I wanna keep the canela stick whole so that I can take it out later because I need to blend it all. And you don't want the compote to have canela pieces in it for sure. If you don't have access to canela sticks, you might use canela, cinnamon powder. But I recommend the sticks because they have more flavor and you can be sure that they are cinnamon. There's a Chinese cinnamon that is called cassia, and many times you find it in markets, and many times they sell it to you as cinnamon, as Mexican cinnamon. So try to make sure that your canela is canela and that it is from Mexico. It's simple to distinguish canela from cassia, as cassia is much thicker. Canela is very flaky. It's a cortex of a tropical tree, and it sort of rolls within itself. It's a thin cortex. Cassia is thicker. So just be mindful because canela is much more fragrant than cassia. So I really recommend that you use that. This is thickening, and I want to lower the fire as much as possible so that it doesn't burn, but that it's cooking while I chop my guavas. I want to cut these into slices. The outside part of the guava, we're going to use to fill the tamal. We're going to mix it up with the guava compote. You can cut it in squares. I want to do sort of longer slices of it. So, feel free to experiment with however you want to cook it. I want to make sure that you have the pieces of the guava in the tamal, and even if they will be cooked through once you finish your tamal, it does give you a little bit of a bite. And you don't have to worry about being very precise in the cutting. As I said, it's all going to be very mushy. Usually the pink guavas, and it all depends on the ripeness of the guava, but usually the pink guavas are much more fragrant, and it doesn't have to do with the sweetness. They can be as bland or as sweet, but the fragrancy of the pink ones is really impressive. And it's also, I just like the color. I think it's a beautiful pink. Let me see how we're doing here. You want the syrup to cook through enough so that the guava centers that you took out disintegrate. It's important to find a fruit that has enough pectin so that it does become a compote and it's not too loose. Otherwise, you can't fill a tamal with a very watery consistency. You need it to be somewhat solid. Also, the guava pectin really helps it thicken. Pectin is the gelatinous component of fruit, and this is what we want to hold the compote together. This is why you make jams with apples and berries and all these fruits and plums. Plum tamales are delicious. All stone fruits are really good to make tamales, because you make nice compotes out of stone fruits. So I'm gonna cook this syrup for about 10, 12 minutes. And once it's cooked, I'm gonna blend it and then mix it with this. Let it sit while I prepare my masa. Okay, so now I'm gonna turn this off. I'm gonna take my canela, which really smells delicious. This pot while I use the immersion blender. So I'm gonna start at a low speed, and I'm blending the water with the piloncillo, which is the sugar, the cane sugar, and all the inside of the guava that have been cooking for about 10, 12 minutes. It's hot. Okay, I think this is blended enough. So what you want is to make sure that you disintegrate all the pieces of the guava and that it's a very uniform syrup. And, you know, it's a sort of a heavy but uniform syrup. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna pass it through the colander just so that we make sure we don't have to eat the seeds, which are the only problematic part of a guava. There we go. We take out everything, so we just use up every part of what we prepared. It's important that you move it so that the seeds don't block the liquid. You see how the only thing left in here is the guava seeds. And you want to make sure you want to mix it with a spoon so that you make sure that you get every bit of the syrup except for the seeds. So you see how now we have just the seeds left. There we go. I'm gonna make sure that we don't lose anything, any of our precious syrup. Then we are going to put our guavas inside our syrup so that we finish our compote for the filling of our guava tamal. The cooking of the guava makes it dark brown, and the piloncillo intensifies that color. It's reminiscent of caramel. I associate sweet tamales with having piloncillo, and piloncillo is always brown. So I guess I'm used to it. I hope you don't mind it. Here we are. We're gonna let this sit for a little bit while we prepare our masa. So I already have measured out 700 grams of masa, and in a proportion with fat. Tamales are always masa mixed with some kind of fat. Otherwise, if you don't put the fat and you don't put air into the dough, you end up having a really heavy tamal. A delicious tamal is a tamal that is airy, that is a little bit greasy or greasy enough that you really can't stop eating it. So what I'm gonna show you, inside our mixer bowl, I'm gonna put our fat first so that the butter fluffens. You say fluffens? So the butter fluffs. I want the butter to be really, really fluffy before we put the masa in. So I'm gonna start beating it. And of course you can do this by hand. And it's, you know, it can be fun. Maybe if you have kids love to get their hand into dough. Usually in tamales, even in sweet tamales, one would use lard. Lard is the traditional Mexican fat, pork lard. And lard isn't either salty nor sweet. Lard is associated with savory food just because we're used to eating meat in a savory way. So you use that for sweet tamales in general in Mexico. The reason I choose butter is, for me, the association of butter and sweet is like an immediate take back to sweets just baked and desserts, and maybe it's a more European influence. I mean, for sure it's a European influence, but I think that for sweet tamales, it works. I also encourage you to use cream, for example, like a whipped cream over a sweet tamal. That's delicious. And that's certainly not traditional, but it's good. Okay, our butter is very fluffy, so now I'm gonna add sugar. And I choose to add white refined sugar just because it's easier to mix in the dough. You could use a grated piloncillo again, but I don't think it's, you know, this is more convenient and it's practical. I'm gonna put baking powder and I'm gonna put baking soda. So this is star anise that has been ground. And I'm gonna put 3 pinches of that into the buttered, and I'm gonna make sure that it's really well mixed. And I'm gonna start adding pieces of masa. And this is, as you can see, this is a perfectly nixtamalized masa, and it is the same that we use for tortillas. Usually in tamales, you can get away with having a thicker ground masa because you cook it again so long. So you can grind masa differently, but it's the same process of nixtamalizing that you use for making tortillas. So I'm gonna start throwing it in there. So I'm putting in pieces of masa slowly so that it integrates with the butter. It's just easier to see that it's being well mixed. I want to mix it up a little bit more. So I'm gonna give it 2 more minutes at high speed. You need to be patient. Thank goodness for mixers. The trick for a good tamal is that the masa really has a lot of air in it. I want this to feel like heavy whipped cream. You see how it falls? It's sort of light in a way, but it's still very, very firm. It's exactly like heavy whipped cream. So you need to make sure that that's the consistency you have. And if you don't have that, it means that your masa still needs to be whipped. And usually this is done by hand. So in a bowl, mixing up with your hand, it's intense. As I say, thank goodness for mixers, really. This is looking really good, and now we're ready to build our tamales. So we are ready to build our tamales. You are gonna see how easy this actually is. It's just a lengthy process, but it's easy. So we have our corn husks. You could find these at most Mexican stores. We have our corn husks that have been soaking in lukewarm water for a couple of hours, and they're very soft, and now you can put the dough in it. I'm gonna dry them out a little bit with this cloth, just to make sure that my tamales are not more wet than I need them to be. So I'm gonna build them here. I'm actually gonna prepare a couple of these so that they start drying off. And then you open your corn husk. These are really perfect corn husks, and they're complete. If you don't have complete corn husks as this, you can put 2 together, one over the other. The point is that your dough does not leave the tamal. It's supposed to sort of wrap it up. See, I'm being a little bit messy. So I'm gonna put like two spoonfuls of the dough. And I am gonna spread it out a little bit. And I am gonna put a spoonful of the guava compote. And then, you don't wanna put too much, because if you put too much, then it doesn't hold. It disintegrates. So I am gonna make sure that the dough goes to the back of the corn husk, not too much so that it doesn't spill. You know, the only important thing is that you wrap them in a way that you take the air out and that you put them in the pot so that you don't lose any of its contents. And this is how I'm gonna cook it in the pot. I'm gonna start building them, and once I have enough, I'm gonna put them into the hot tamal cooker, and it's basically a steamer. I've turned on the fire, and it is a steamer. There's water underneath. Tamales always have to be steamed because it's the only way to guarantee that they don't dry out. Once they have been cooked in a steamer, then you might char them, and that can be nice. Not in the case of these guava tamales, so we don't even need to worry about that. I am spreading the tamal masa. So ideally, you make a little volcano shape. You want to spread it out so that when you fold it, you kind of have the masa sort of securing the filling. It should be completely enveloped, like a little package. Tamales are packages. This is literally what a tamal is. Because then you open it and eat it, and you have your own plate. And it's compostable. It's a very convenient party food. So for tamales, you can use either corn husks, which we're using here, or banana leaves, or there's a very traditional tamal from Michoacan called uchepo, and that is wrapped in corn leaves. But it's really a preference. It's also a traditional thing. It depends on where you're at and what you have at hand. It's not really because of the flavor. You don't do it as much for the flavor. The banana leaf holds up more liquid, more of a liquid filling, and corn husks don't hold as well. Corn husks are more tricky. You want a drier tamal for a corn husk. In general, the tamales that are wrapped in banana leaves are tamales that are very wet. They are tamales that you even add like chicken broth to. As soon as I'm done filling these corn husks with the dough, I'm gonna steam them. And I will show you this in a little bit. I have finished wrapping our tamales in the corn husks, and I'm ready to put them in our steamer. The water's boiling, so it's ready to go. It needs to be very steamy, and you need to make sure that you always have water, enough water so that it keeps on steaming, because that's what's gonna cook the tamales. So I have enough water, so, to get it going. And you want to make sure that you put your tamales in a vertical position, and that the place where the dough and the filling could come out of is upward. And I'm gonna line them up vertically. I'm gonna hold on to anything that might fall. And the whole point of the tamal steamer is that they secure each other and they all cook together. Tamales are a wonderful thing to make ahead of time. They're a wonderful thing to make ahead of parties. They're usually made by women. Women have fun making them together. All these very laborious tasks are made so much better when you have company to make them with. I made a very small quantity of tamales. Any true Mexican tamal maker would laugh at this quantity of tamales. But I also think, the reality is that once you have your dough ready and your filling, you might as well make more, because then you can freeze them and have them ready to go. And tamales frozen from the freezer to the steamer are ready in 15 minutes, and they are good to go for any occasion. I always love to have tamales in my freezer. So here we are. I made enough for this little pot. And we have our tamales ready to go. I'm putting a lid on, and I will always make sure that I have enough water to keep the steam going, but I want to cook these for about at least 1 hour. And with the fat quantity, it's very wet, so I want them to really cook through. And it's like a cake. You need to wait for it. This is a little oven, and you need to make sure, you could put, how you open the oven and put a knife and make sure it comes out clean. This is exactly what you want with your tamal. So I would recommend that in about 50 minutes to 60 minutes, so maximum 1 hour, you open one of them and you make sure that the dough is cooked through. And if it is, you can just turn it off. Now we're just gonna let it sit here, steaming, making sure the water doesn't run out. And when they're cooked through, we're gonna be able to eat them. Now we are ready to take our tamales out. Turn it off. The tamales have been cooked through. And I'm gonna use tongs just so I don't burn my hands. Delicious. Actually, I am gonna use my hands, because this pot is too small. So the beauty of the tamal is that now that it's cooked, it contains itself, like it's not coming out. And now we're ready to taste them. And I would recommend leaving the tamales inside the pot until you want to serve them, because they have to be steaming hot to be eaten. And I will Let's take one of them. Which one should we take? This one. I want to open it. Delicious. You see how the masa is cooked through? And you can either eat it in the husk. If you wouldn't have a plate, you would eat it in the husk. Otherwise, you could, I'm gonna eat it in this plate. As I said before, you can put a little bit of whipped cream. You could put more of the compote. You could just eat it like I am gonna eat it. And I'll tell you how it is. I can't wait. It's really good. Está delicioso. And you can still see the color. You can still see the guava, the pink guava. And it's not that sweet, but you still get the tangy fruit, which is why I like to use fruit and sweeten the masa, not only the compote. I know making tamales sounds really daunting, but as you saw, the only important thing is that you wrap them up well, so that once they are in your steamer, you don't have the risk of them falling apart. You want them to be super tight. And the only way to make a tamal come out like this, it's its own little thing, is to really wrap it well. And so I urge you to wrap tamales very well. It's the fluffiness of the masa and the wrapping of the tamales that makes for a good tamal. I'm eating the whole of this, just so you know. I think there is no Mexican that could say that food is not an important part of our culture. I grew up in a context in which every important part of life had to somehow do with food. We had important conversations at the table while eating. We made important decisions at the table while eating. I have a very direct association between important moments in life and good meals. And I believe in this world, the more one can connect with people over a shared love of a delightful dish, the better off we will be. In Mexico, we have a culture that thankfully still prides itself with the art of hospitality. We're a very welcoming culture. In Mexico, we are kind to people that are in front of us, and the art of serving is the key to Contramar's success of so many years. I believe the most important thing about a restaurant is the food, for sure. But a food that is served in a context of welcoming, warm generosity is so much better than with, cold, not caring service. From the beginning, we set out to do a restaurant where food was the central focus and service as well. We didn't even have but one stove. We didn't have a proper oven, but it was really the warmth of the people that came to work with us, that came to be a part of the team, that made it what it is today. And that philosophy has sort of permeated the way that everybody feels at the restaurants. You probably are cooking for somebody that you care about. So I really urge you to pay attention to every bit of what you put into the dish, everything in which you serve it, every plate, every glass that you put, and not in an erotic, obsessive way, just in a way in which you translate your enjoyment for doing that. And I know it's not always easy. When one has to cook every night for a family, it's hard. But I guess the more one can put the duty aside and the caring for the details, the better off your result will be. And I believe that that is the best accompaniment or the best company for good food. Cooking at home is the best thing you can do because it implies so many things. It implies that somebody took the care, somebody took the time, that somebody knows how to master something enough to offer it to their loved ones or their friends. I think the most important lesson that comes from running restaurants successfully and, being a professional restaurateur or restauratrice in my case, is not compromising on quality at all, ever. If you start from good ingredients, I have a friend who always says, you know, you put good with good, and the result is gonna be good. It's very difficult to be mindful of what you're cooking and ruin good ingredients. If you start off with bad ingredients, you're not gonna be set up for success. So I wanna set you up for success by really insisting on quality of what you cook with. Other than that, I would really urge you to experiment, improvise, go to the market and see what's available, go to the farmer's market, go online and look for other recipes of the same dish and see what you like more. And it's all about cooking and it's all about tasting. Taste, taste, taste all the time.